everybody. How was your Christmas? Puncher, Darkside,
Outstanding.
nice.
Any better, and I couldn't stand it. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, it was wonderful. I um, punched out, pun intended. Um, tried not to get too Bitcoin centric, so it was great. The conversation always seems to come up when I get together with family, just because I've been preaching it for so long, but I'm not as, I guess, forceful or obnoxiously Bitcoin in family settings anymore. So,
Had nothing to do with the Bitcoin T-shirt you were wearing and the Bitcoin hat.
well, touche. Speaking of Bitcoin t-shirts, I think one of my favorites, and I have a drawer full, is the one I got from you, buddy. That one's great. Get a lot of comments on it as well. So thank you for that.
That'll be my thing. Whenever we get together, I'll have a whole new T-shirt made up and designed.
You do a great job. I mean, if that was all you, that was impressive. It's good because each angle, like you got the thing on the shoulder, you got the back, the front, you got it all covered. So it's great. Plus, it's a great quality shirt. It's thanks again.
Tri-blend. You got to go with the tri-blend. A little more expensive, but that soft material. That's the difference.
Try blend, folks. You heard it here first. Dark side, how about you? How was your Christmas?
It was wonderful. Thank you so much. Merry
Awesome.
Christmas, everybody. It was
Yes.
kind of cool to see. I don't know if anyone caught it last night. Grant Cardone was on Fox Jesse Waters show. Uh, he did a great job. He's becoming an amazing ambassador.
Sweet. Um, at some point, I do want to talk about the options thing. Um, but maybe we'll let the room fill up a little bit first and get some people I know. The dark side, you probably know more than Puncher and myself. I can't speak for Puncher, but I'm just assuming. Um, but it'd be kind of cool to get some more insight into that. I know Joe C has some thoughts on it. He was typing into another chat space, implying that I didn't know he was talking about. That's why I asked who he was specifically referencing when he said that we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. I assumed we, as in me, maybe included in that, which he would have been right, but I would have liked him to explain more where he was coming from. I'm curious about it all. I mean, I mess around with options a little bit, like I know Puncher does, but I just do it a tiny fraction on my degen side because I'm a gambler. But other than that, I'm not sure. It'd be fun to get somebody in here who, like Josh. Maybe we'll send Josh an invite. Did you read any articles on that dark side?
I did. I'm just kind of I'm I've never really focused on Deribit because I've always been so US centric in like the way I look at options. I mean, personally, I shy away from anything that's offshore because of the substantial counterparty risk, but Deribit is just enormous. So I really need to kind of spend some time looking into Deribit. It just blows my mind that that it's that big a market.
Yeah, if anybody in the audience right now is knowledgeable, please come on up here and inform us. I have a limited knowledge, but I'm definitely no expert on the matter. But I'm definitely curious about it. Did you read the article I posted in the other group, Dark Side?
I did. Yeah, I mean, $18 billion expiring today. Now, I think when they say 18 billion, what they mean is that's what the options were originally traded
Yeah,
for,
right.
right? Not actually 18 billion expiring today,
And I think
but
they
it
lumped ETH into that, so I think which is only like another three, so I think it
three,
was
yeah,
still over 14. So it's
yeah,
crazy.
it's a big number. Um,
And they also put a Max Payne figure in there. Did you notice that? Or
yeah, so I saw that. It's kind of funny. I'm reading now. Deribit is located in Panama.
ah,
It's just like not the financial capital of the world. That's crazy to me that this type of volume is trading on an exchange located in Panama.
Yeah, interesting. I know a lot of these things are strategically located in certain jurisdictions because of regulations and whatnot. So, uh, yet again, I'm speaking out of ignorance, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're located there for a reason.
Yeah, well, they're offshore, right? They're
Right,
not subject to
exactly.
U.S. regulations, but
And
still,
and
I have to say, Panama City is not the beacon of political stability.
yeah,
Especially given what's going on right now. With the squawking about Panama
for sure.
Canal.
Yep. And I 100% agree with you when it comes to, third party risk or that undue risk of messing around with these things that are not, not in the US or in areas like that that are a little unstable. So it's a
Right. That
little
being
sketchy.
said, the volumes are
Crazy.
enormous.
Yeah. Insane, huh? Maybe we can get Eggman up here. He definitely knows a little bit more about this topic than I.
Well, Darkside, not to
Yes,
switch
sir.
topics, but who is selling at 94,000? I'm with you. I think they're dumping the whatever the U.S. has,
Yeah,
and for
I've
whatever
been on
reason,
that. I've
pardoning
been singing
murderers and
that.
criminals and traitors to our country by the thousands. It's just insane. Lawrence
Yeah,
Lepard asked me, he's like, who, why is he doing this? I'm like, he has been gone for a long time. I want to know who
yeah.
they is. And I want to know, like, real soon who they is.
Yeah, I don't think you have to look much further than Barack and his buddies. And
Can we not see that wallet or those wallets? Because I know the DOJ moved coins two separate
Can
times
you guys
to
hear me?
Coinbase.
you could
Yeah, we
see
can hear
them.
you.
You could see them, but that doesn't stop them from selling.
Unloading them. Yeah,
Unloading via forward contract. So like
right.
they could use an OTC desk and say, look, we'll settle on January 19th. Go ahead and take these orders. Nothing's stopping that from happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And just to add to kind of the weirdness around this, if you look at the last time they moved coins, they moved $1 billion of coins to Coinbase and 2 billion to an unknown wallet, right? And they've never moved coins to an unknown wallet, as far as I know, right?
Hey, Darkside, did you hear my question? I couldn't hear anybody. Did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm with you, Puncture. I suspect that they will do everything they can to scuttle the ship the best they can. And I've had that look. I've been pounding this thesis for months now, over a month.
Yeah, I know you had. And I was 60-40 that you were right on that. Now I'm like 90-10, trending toward 100%. Like I just smash bought another 10 grand at 94,000, which is crazy to me. I think it's crazy.
Nice. Omar, good morning.
Good
What
morning,
are your
brother.
thoughts
How are
on
you?
this? I'm great. How
Yeah,
about
I
you?
don't know. I don't know if you guys noticed there was a bit of an odd trend. Every single time Arkham Intelligence has reported that there was a transfer out of their wallet to an unknown wallet over the last 60 days, within 24 hours, uh, Biden has announced a new aid package to Ukraine of amounts that are similar to those transfers. Um, I went back and I checked. Literally within 24 to 48 hours, they announced a package of that goes from 600 million to 1.5 million, and it was literally 48 to 72 hours after those transfers were made. And all of them were to be delivered in late December to January. So it's something to look at. It's a little odd. And on top of that, those last amounts that were signed by Biden did not go through Congress, and he might be selling the Bitcoin and sending that money to Ukraine. I wouldn't, it's a possibility.
Wouldn't surprise me one bit.
I just hate weighing in on things that I have zero clue what the hell I'm talking about. So, I mean, something's going on. That seems apparent. But if you ask people like Joe C, he has a logical explanation for everything, but I don't always agree with Joe C either. So I'm not. It does appear that shenanigans take place behind the scenes, and anything with the current U.S. government administration wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I mean, in my opinion, I think they're the evilest, most evil administration we've had to date in the history of the United States. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, forget about Bitcoin for a second. They're giving people blanket pardons for crimes they may have committed over the last decade. I mean, what the fuck is that? By the way, is that even legal? Like, I would overturn that shit in a second if I was Trump. I'd say, like, yeah, we're not recognizing those pardons. That you can't pardon someone for a crime for which they have not been charged. That's insane. Well, that's just a blanket admission of guilt. And then it extends to, taking money from our enemies, to pardoning murderers and child rapists. Like, what the fuck is this? This is insane. Pardon my language, but this is evil shit. And these people need to be held to account. And I don't think anybody's going to be in an uproar if Trump comes in and says, yeah, all those bullshit pardons, we're not recognizing them. You're going to stay in jail. You're going to stay a convicted child molester. You're going to stay a convicted traitor. And then we'll hash through each one of these. And I want to know who they is, because Joe Biden clearly is not in charge. Neither is Kamala Harris. So who is they? And they're acting outside of whatever powers they might think they have. So let's get these assholes too, because if we don't and it's allowed to stand, it's a big problem.
Well, one of them is clearly the Soros family.
Yeah, I think Eggman has something to say about that one too, because he does live in that neck of the woods.
Sorosville, Colorado. Yeah, he's dominated our political landscape by basically financially bankrolling every major position of power in the state. I just think that the tell was on Christmas following, or excuse me, the morning following Christmas at 2 a.m. I believe that was the time, and you had a massive dump, took us from 99 and change down to 94. It's Occam's razor. This stuff just doesn't add up. It's intentional.
Well, I think things will definitely turn around in about the middle of January, so we can hold on hope for that. In the meantime, I guess we just have to ride this out because God only knows what's going on in DC right now with the paper shredders and the hard drives being deleted. And I mean, it's crazy, to touch on what Puncher said. I don't really care about the legalities of these things. It's the moral and ethical things that are just being absolutely crushed. It's like, come on, guys. Like, what is in the best interest of humanity here? Not, oh, well, if I can get away with this, then I'm going to do it regardless of, if it has any moral or ethical bearings whatsoever. And that's wrong, man. Completely and utterly wrong.
It's pretty obvious that Biden's not running the ship here. I mean, to restate the obvious, there's some evil beings doing some evil stuff right now.
Well, it's not just he that dropped off the face of the earth. It's also the vice president after the election. I haven't heard, I mean, I haven't really paid attention as much, but I haven't heard a lot from either one of those two. So it's crazy that we're not on autopilot, that's for sure, but it appears as such when you actually are looking at appearances by them or anything that they're really calling the shots on.
At the same time, if we zoom out, we're still at almost $95,000 Bitcoin, which is a big number, right? Like, we would have, if you would have asked us 4 months ago, would we take 95K at the end of the year? Who would have said no?
That's a great point. And I was gonna try to get I think Eladio was in here for a minute, but was really hoping, even just for my own sake, but I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that also would be interested in more information on, the options and everything. So if anybody in here knows anything, Eggy, I think you probably know more than me for sure, but thoughts, options, expiring.
It just feels like they're going to run it into the ground. I'd love to hear Darkside's take, but it feels to me like they're just going to run this into the ground till the end of market today. But I'd be curious what Darkside thinks about that.
Nobody knows, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
When does
it's like
when does
trying.
this actually expire? Was it what time exactly? Like what time zone and what time do these things expire? Anybody know?
I think last time to place to order is 11 a.m., but I think close is 4:30.
Yeah, 430. And Omar, it's 14 billion on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, 14.2 billion. I think it's 14.25. Yeah.
Hey, Lauren, I wish I had one of
Yeah.
those mobile shredding. Uh, I was seeing those over in Germany. I would love to have one of those because if I did, man, I would drive to Washington, D.C. and charge an absolute fortune and just shred all day long from now to the end of
Oh, yeah,
January.
those big trucks that have
Yeah.
the shredders in there and they just have the bends and you could just be shredding like crazy. Yeah. Well, they'll probably have to resort to bonfires to destroy documents because it seems pretty asinine.
It says
I
here
was
that
down.
Deribit options expire at 8 o'clock UTC. I think that's 4 p.m.
Okay.
London and 11 a.m. Eastern. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I think 11 o'clock.
So they're expired.
You know, oh, okay. Do you know how they do the max pain calculations and all that jazz? Anybody on the panel?
Yeah, that would be where there's the most short options at particular strikes, right? So the max
Gotcha.
pay-in threshold is where the most people see their options expire worthless. That's how it's calculated.
Okay.
So you're looking at the open interest at different strike prices, and then looking to see, if those expire worthless, who loses the most money.
This is going to get really interesting too, as these options. I mean, this is obviously, what is this, the second round of them since they were introduced? As these things continually hit, they hit on Fridays, and then the market is closed for the weekend, and yet Bitcoin does not close. So there can be, by the time the market opens again on Monday morning, there could be some egregious activity during the weekend that can really
Where did
make things interesting.
What were you saying, Darkside?
No,
Darkside just rolled up.
sorry. I
There he
was,
is.
I was,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
was just, I was just doing a little homework here on Deribit, but it looks like those options have expired now.
Yeah. It's 11 a.m. Yeah.
it's got
So
a little bit of a bounce.
could be interesting if we don't catch a bid here.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a bit.
Yeah, keep in mind, guys, there's also a lot of portfolio rebalancing going on. I mean, there's a lot. Wall Street has been, there's been a lot of institutional investments this whole year, and we're starting to trade very similarly to equities. So there's a lot of tax harvesting and portfolio rebalancing. So we have to keep that in mind too.
Omar, but what are they rebalancing? Like they're not long Bitcoin and want to lock in gains on Bitcoin itself, right? They're long some derivative of Bitcoin, correct? Most of them.
Yeah, yeah, but
I'll take that one. I'll take that one, Omar. So if you're in an institutional setting, and your investment committee has assigned a 1% allocation to Bitcoin, then in theory, if Bitcoin has gone up and you have a rebalancing date of, let's say, the end of the year, then you would sell to get back to your 1% allocation to Bitcoin. So that's what, when we talk about rebalancing, it's usually rebalancing. In this case, because Bitcoin's higher, you'd be a seller back to your allocation percentage.
But even those institutions, Dark, aren't they buying a derivative, right? They're not buying Bitcoin itself.
Most
Is
most institutions would be buying the ETF. It's just much easier to hold than Bitcoin itself. But that's a proxy. It's a one-to-one proxy.
Yeah, so can't we see what the ETFs? I mean, I haven't been paying attention. Are there
Yeah,
outflows in the ETFs or
yeah.
are there inflows?
The other
Yeah.
day, 2 days ago, was the largest outflows the ETFs have seen in a single day.
Yeah, we had 1.5 billion in outflows 3 straight days. Yesterday was an inflow day. I think
Yeah,
500 million in inflows. Yeah.
yeah. Yesterday was smaller, but
Yeah, 'cause I thought they took care of most of those trades prior to Christmas, probably around in the teens or early 20s, right? Or even before that, not days after Christmas, usually.
I I don't know. You usually see this weakness. Like a lot of the FANG stocks. I remember in like 2022 just started to collapse right at the end of the month in 2022, and then in the middle of January you just saw it absolutely just ripped higher. So they were just buying back in. But I think that's what's going to happen here. Anyone remember Tesla or Meta at the end of December 2022?
That had some COVID implications too, I think. So if you bought a 1% out or 1% allocation of Bitcoin, it essentially doubled if you had done that any time prior to, gosh, I don't know, August, I think. Memory serves me right. So now you have a 2% plus allocation. You have to get it back to one, so you sell, and that's the majority of the selling. On top of what we think could potentially be the Biden administration giving the final middle finger to Trump by selling some uh, of our 200,000, now a number undetermined, or in addition to, I guess.
yeah, and all that being said, we've gone from, substantially overbought, maybe let's call it a week and a half ago, to now being, a little bit oversold, both 4 hour, even on a daily chart. So, we've done quite a bit of constructive activity for the price in a relatively short period of time. So I think the setup is extremely bullish. I don't see the big flush coming, but who knows?
I agree. I think we get a pop this weekend.
I hope so. I got a major dinner riding on 100,000 Bitcoin.
Saw that.
You
Yeah.
do?
Well,
Oh
I mean,
man,
I got to buy for
what
like
what do you
12
pay for
Super.
that?
Yeah.
You gotta get ready to pay for that. It's not happening.
You don't think, huh?
I was thinking so, but then the more I look at this is tax selling, this is rebalancing, and then they're just going to wait. I've seen this time and time again. They're going to wait till like January 5th, and then it's just going to rocket ship higher.
By the way, this was a Joe Calasari-esque type bet where we bet that Bitcoin wouldn't be above 100,000, and then when it rocketed through 100,000, the guy turns around and says, "No, I said close at above 100,000," and like an
He
idiot,
said
he went away
close
from it. Yeah,
at
unbelievable.
England time while you guys are in a space
Right.
at a full moon.
Yeah, so I don't even
um,
care. They're buddies, so I don't even care. But still hate to lose.
What he meant is it closes north of 100,000 Greenwich Mean Time, and Pubby is sitting in Mayfair and is on his fourth pint before
Yeah.
midnight.
Unless it's snowing out, and then all bets are off.
Yeah, and if the weather is bad in London at that time, then you lose.
So the bet, because it's funny you say that because that tweet just came across my feed. He's got the two active bets with Doc Kruger and Beagle Bitcoin. Number one
And me.
is that it hits a new all-time high before New Year's, and number two is it hits 111K before New Year's. So yeah, that 111, it's going to take some movement for sure. All-time
That
high, who knows?
Pubby, that bet, I was part of that. I made an offer, or somebody made an offer, and I never got an acceptance. So that for me is not a bet.
I don't know all about the stuff you guys talk about with the rebalancing. I know Dom Bay mentions that if you ever hear him talk, he's the guy is just super smart on the pension plans, and I think that it's just comical. Like imagine going, hey honey, guess what? Bitcoin's more than 1% of our portfolio. It's now 10%. We got to sell 9% and buy something else. The logic is astounding. It truly is. So yeah, there you go. I like learning from you
That's just
guys.
that's just the formula that all of these funds use. So I agree with you, Pubby, but it's not something that they can just tweak. They've been doing it this way for decades, and so that's just part of their whole rebalancing
Oh,
that policy. Yeah,
I get all that.
it is
My point
ridiculous.
is the small companies or someone like it's going to be these small companies that can get around it with a small.
Right.
It's the big monoliths, right, with all the bureaucracy that are going to
Yes.
be going to losing out on millions and billions potentially.
Well, it's like Darkside's story of, Bitcoin being a small portion of his portfolio, and then without him adjusting anything at all, suddenly it became the largest part of his portfolio. So, I mean, a lot of these businesses would be in that same boat if they wouldn't keep adjusting things. But yeah, exactly what you're saying, Puppy. It's lunacy, but it's, the way they've
Just
been doing it for years.
And
this is why you shouldn't have your money managed by one of these guys. You should manage your own shit.
well, look, a lot of these guys think Bitcoin is just like a stock, right? I can't tell you how many guys are like, it's correlated to the market and it's just like a stock and it trades like a stock. I'm like, whatever. But even if you look at the FANGs, look at Amazon. At no point was it ever over the last 30 years a good idea to sell Amazon ever. Like
I
so
would disagree. I would sell it right now.
well, all right. But I mean, historically, they've been wrong, this rebalancing when it comes to these network effect tech stocks. It's always been bad. It's like Sailor says, when was it a bad idea to buy a piece of Manhattan? Like never. It's the same type of thing, but they still haven't figured it out yet.
This is why they underperform the market and why dumbasses like us outperform the market by 2 to 3x every year. We don't even have to do anything. It's like sit here and hang out and 50, 60% return every year, right? Like doing nothing really.
Hey, Justin just posted an awesome piece up into the nest. Bitwise is going to start an ETF of companies that hold more than 1,000 Bitcoin.
I love this idea.
Yeah,
That is interesting, isn't it?
I don't
super
know why I
interesting.
love it. It's so cool. I'll buy this for sure. No doubt about it.
What's the fee structure?
They're probably high.
I haven't read the prospectus yet. I think it's just filed.
How long do you think it would take to get this thing rolling? Because I'm really interested because I wanted to buy similar and other ones, but I just don't have I don't want to measure the companies and worry about buying it. But
Well, it's interesting because it allows retailers to get access to these converts, but it's also
no, that's a different one. That's a different one, Puncher. This is
oh, okay.
another one. This is another ETF.
Oh, maybe I missed it. Okay.
Yeah, this is an
This is for
ETF for that's going to buy companies that have a Bitcoin treasury strategy and hold more than 1,000 Bitcoin.
Okay.
So
So the point I was going to make is still valid. Not only does it allow, in this case, retailers to aggregate those companies very easily, and the other one where you have access to the converts, it also incents the companies themselves to buy Bitcoin and issue converts.
yeah, definitely.
So it's doubly accretive to Bitcoin.
yeah, if this ETF gains traction, the game theory here is really interesting. In as much as if you're a mid cap company and you acquire 1,000 Bitcoin, all of a sudden you have a new buyer of your stock. So that helps to inflate your currency. It's very interesting.
Dark. This thing is going to gain a lot of traction, man. I think it's going to do really well. Because not only are you exposed to Bitcoin, you're exposed to the other pieces of the company. So you'll have Tesla. If FSD and the bot comes out, I mean, you're going to have that thing pushing this thing higher. I mean, Semler is a pretty decent company outside of the Bitcoin holdings. Like you can be exposed to so much stuff on top of it being exposed to obviously Bitcoin. I think it's very cool.
This goes back to what we were talking about rebalancing, right? Like um, everything on Wall Street's always about diversification, right? And as Bitcoin maximalists, we're all about concentration, right? So it's such a contradiction just inside of the way we think about things.
Toss in the political environment that's about to change too. I mean, huge tailwind there. They'll be supportive of it.
Maybe Egg or Dark can answer this question. When a company gets inside of an index, let's just say the S&P, and now no matter what, an allocation, a very large allocation, goes into buying that company's stock. What is it that gets a company knocked out of that, like, self-licking lollipop where, the stock price goes up because everybody's just buying it, and price discovery doesn't, performance doesn't seem to mean a whole lot?
Hey, Puncher, maybe in addition to that, specifically the flip side, specifically with MSTR, how the introduction into the NASDAQ 100 or whatever actually plays out in layman's terms. So both of those questions to like Dark or somebody. Great question, Puncher.
Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting question, right? Because like in the end, we have a $2 billion, like let's use MicroStrategy into the QQQ as an example. You have a $2 billion buy order, which obviously has been satisfied. Now you get to the point where the stock actually assumes a little bit of a higher beta to the stock market because obviously, those passive flows work both ways. On a day like today, you have selling coming into MicroStrategy that's not organic, it's just passive flows with the market going down. So, it works both ways. The indexes rebalance, like in the case of QQQ, it rebalances quarterly. So and it rebalances based on market cap. So as MicroStrategy continues to do more and more issuance of stock, right, their market cap goes up without the price of the stock even going up, right? So you can have a scenario where MicroStrategy continues to rocket higher as in market cap without their stock price going up because their very strategy is to sell stock and buy Bitcoin.
And why are they selling stock versus doing the converts? What's the thinking behind that, Dark?
I think they want to get that out of the way, and then they're hoping that the stock price goes higher so they can ladder their converts, which are really just options at higher and higher prices. I think that's the thinking behind it.
So the pain is up front in issuing stock, at least to the current shareholders.
Yeah, I mean it's dilutive and accretive, right? That's kind of the contradiction. It's an amazing strategy, right? As long as the MNAV's above 1, it's dilutive to the shareholders and accretive to the shareholders.
Well, just to finish the thought, it's dilutive in the share price, but accretive in the Bitcoin held, right?
It's dilutive in the number of shares outstanding, and it's accretive because they're buying the Bitcoin with they're buying an asset that is with their MNAV, so they're essentially getting a discount on the asset that they're buying. Right? If your MNAV is 2-to-1 and you issue stock and you buy Bitcoin, then you're basically getting a 50% discount.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Fred, get up here. Fred was in here
Fred,
for a second.
Puncher,
Fred.
you were at. Is he here? I don't see him. Is he here?
I saw him and he disappeared.
Yeah, he popped in and out. There's always like, I think when I looked, there was like 40 people listening anonymously, but often there's like 150 plus.
Hey,
Very weird.
question.
Go ahead.
Why are there so many people that listen anonymously with anonymous accounts? What is that? Because I'll get messages that are like, "Oh, I'm actually in there, but I'm not showing it." And the account will just be like Smith John and no post. Why
I
do
want to
they?
hear. I want to hear if you
Why do
guys
they
are
do that?
talking smack about me. That's why.
What is the reason though? I mean, if you have I could see if you have
You
like
already
your
know we
business
do.
account.
Come on.
You're going
If
to
you have
have
your business,
you're going to have more and more corporations, essentially that are contemplating putting this on their balance sheet that are going to be lingering in the background to try and learn more and also remain
are
anonymous.
those the corporations? Because they'll send me messages too. They're like, "Hey, I heard this thing about this refinance thing," and I'm like, "Who is this?"
Yeah, and I mean not
Is it
exclusively, but
spies? They're
you're gonna
spies, huh?
you're gonna see more of that. You're gonna see more anonymous behavior because they're gonna want to get smart before they acquire.
You got a
Well,
bunch of different people, I believe. I've also had people, um, there's guys like Jason who says he's listening anonymously a lot. It's hilarious too because I'll just get a message responding to something we just talked about, a direct
Jason,
message,
who?
and I'm Lowry.
Oh, really?
And then Josh, Josh said he'll listen anonymously sometimes. I've listened anonymously to spaces where I didn't want to get seen in, like shitcoin spaces, and I didn't want anyone in there to see me, nor do I really want Bitcoin folk, but I really am interested in what they're saying because it's really nice to know what kind of insanity is going on, and you'll never know unless you actually go listen. So I go listen anonymously in some of these rooms as well. I think you also have people that think they're some big mucky muck, so it becomes a dick war kind of thing where they're like, I'm not going to go be seen with those peasants. So I really think there's a bunch of different reasons in addition to what you guys are saying. I definitely think there's, probably people listening that are actually just trying to get information from.
Hey, Loren, and I
Yeah.
recommend if you haven't done it, go into some of these shitcoin spaces and compare the sentiment and the conduct in those with the discussions we have.
The
Yeah, no, I
conduct
can't.
horrible.
I
It's
go and
awful.
listen in there, and yeah, I can't stand it. Like it just
is
drives me
horrible.
bonkers, and I have to leave. Yeah, no,
It's not even
it's
it's not even the shitcoin talkery. It's like you're right. The conduct is just weird. It's just like this.
toxic.
Yeah, it's like
Oh,
drug-fueled madness, man, is what it is. I mean, these guys are all high as kites and they're just spewing bullshit. I mean, it's like a big giant social thing
Well,
that
it is the
I don't
holiday.
get.
Toxic.
hey, if a corporation is listening right now or a big fund and you want to be successful, buy as much fucking Bitcoin as you have, take out debt and buy more. Okay. So if you want to win, that's what you're going to have to do. And if you want to lose, then don't do that. All right. Thank you.
Asteroid is available for consultancy. Please DM
$7,000 an hour because you know I make.
And it's the lesson.
He
Hey,
just
just so you guys,
basically gave you the sailor playbook. So yeah. Hey, if there's any new speakers that want to speak and are trying to, just raise your hand. We'll work
But
you in here. Sorry,
but
go
I
ahead,
gave that
Puncher.
playbook to
hey,
Sailor, just so everyone knows.
so Jason, I don't know if you guys know this, and Lauren, you probably know this. Jason has been sidelined in his command because his DEI hire female commander, who has no business being his commander,
Oh God.
basically said he wrote his thesis to advance his own personal uh, stake in Bitcoin, and it was for personal reasons only and personal gain only, and set him aside and basically ostracized the guy.
Puncher.
I mean,
Does this female have a penis, Puncher?
Two of them.
probably.
One out of her
God
butt.
knows, man.
Hey, don't worry, Puncher. The people in charge are gonna take care of that. If you know what I'm saying.
Oh, trust me, I know.
So here's a bet for anyone. Sailor's sitting at 445,000 Bitcoin. Just since November 11th, he's added 150 more on there. November 25th, he did a smash buy of 55,500. Does he smash by 55,500 to get to the magical 500,000 Bitcoin number by New Year's?
Before we answer this question, Hubby, the more important question: what number are we on?
Oh, I'm just man. It's only noon here. Long day
Perfect.
ahead. Yeah, just
Have
have
fun.
a couple beers at lunch. Yeah, chill out in the afternoon. Maybe a
So
glass of
3.
wine with dinner, man. You gotta pay. You
How,
gotta pace
You're on
yourself.
how much?
You
What
get
did he
3.
say? 2? You said 3?
no a number.
Hubby
I
is
just
always
started.
uncomfortable answering this
Hey,
question.
are,
It's never
Not at
like
all.
are you off work today, Pub?
Yeah. I'm off work, man.
Oh, hey, dude, live it up. Have 10.
Cheers.
Get hammered,
Yeah,
bro.
10 beer. It's a 10-pint day.
Drinking beer is not
Yeah.
drinking. You know, Billy Bob Thornton plays an alcoholic on Landman, and he goes, "I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink. I just drink beer."
I don't really understand all the anti-drinking thing. I mean, every time you drink, it feels so relaxing. Like, why wouldn't you want to do it? That's what I don't get.
Try pot.
It's the ones I think that can't handle their drink, the ones that become violent. Breaks up lives. If you can't pace yourself and control yourself, yeah, it can get out of hand. You know. So that's always in my my mood about it. I always enjoy stopping away home, and I have usually 2 pints in the afternoon, and that's it. Go home, dinner, glass of wine, go to bed. Easy day.
Well,
moderation is a million times better, man. If I had only known that in my 20s, like
Oh,
I never learned that lesson till later.
Well, in Landman, which is a great series I just started last week, the bartender at the Patch, which is the bar that all the oil and gas guys, the workers hang out at, says to Billy Bob Thornton, "Man, why are you drinking beer? Just have a shot of whiskey. I mean, drinking's drinking." He goes, "Give me 6 beers and then give me 6 whiskeys and see if you can tell the difference in my behavior." And he goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, I got it."
Yeah, the hard stuff will get you. The problem is, and I learned this sort of early on, is when you drink shots or you drink the hard stuff as quickly as you drink beer. Okay, when you're drinking as much quantity as you are in just a beer, yeah, you're gonna feel it quickly, and you're gonna make some poor choices.
I had rules. Rule number one, this is growing like in my 20s. Never leave a good time in search of a good time. Girls are notorious for doing that shit. And the second rule was shots are always a bad idea.
Yeah, I know. And you go into the evening saying it's not going to happen, and I have those firm rules as well. There's like 3 or 4, and there's a cascade of them, and you don't break them until a beer and a half in, and suddenly those rules vaporize. But I've learned, man, and the other lesson I know now is drink good shit and like very decent single malts. I mean, I can't even do IPAs anymore. I'm such a wimp now. I'm a massive lightweight. You used to have to drink a 6-pack and do a shot to leave the house just to get the threshold, and now it's like two light beers with dinner, man, or a good red wine, a single malt, something like that, and go to bed. I got to be able to sleep good. I'm old.
This is a true story. Before I got into hosting spaces with Anders. We used to it all started because I didn't have anyone I knew that was into Bitcoin, and I heard him on a podcast and just DM'd him. We started talking. So every day we would talk for an hour or two after work. I have a beer, and he says, "You know what? I used to do a YouTube channel. I should start it back up." I said, "Yeah, why not, man? We'll talk Bitcoin, and people can jump in." Well, we just reached out, American Hodl and Hodl and Not, and all the, and Jeff Booth. We just put out a thing. Hey, you guys want to come on for an interview? And everyone was so gracious, saying, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Well, we reached out to Robert Breedlove. He goes, "Yeah, I'll come on, but I'm in Bali, if that's okay. I can do it in the morning here." And that was going to be at like 9 o'clock at night my time, which is fine. I usually go to bed early, but I'll stay up. Well, that day we had a going away party for a good colleague that I had known for 20 years. So we had started with beers in the afternoon at 2, but unfortunately we did have the shots. Well, by the time 9 o'clock rolled around, yeah, I was feeling good, man. I was feeling real good. And the great idea at the time is you pour yourself, another stiff one while you're talking to Robert Breedlove. And halfway through, um, I don't know what happens, dude. I wake I wake up on the floor of my bedroom, okay, and I go into bed like, what the fuck happened? In the morning, I get up, my phone is blowing up. Like, I can't believe you passed out on Free Love, man. I'm like, once I go to the YouTube thing. Sure enough, there I am, just sort of getting little wavy there. Then I fall over on my side, and Anders goes and mutes my thing. But yeah, passed out on Bree Love, and after that, I learned a valuable lesson about podcasts and drinking.
Puppy, didn't you do that to Sailor too?
No, we never had Sarah on a podcast. He came to our plug party. Remember that one, Miami? He's a good dude.
And you passed out on him too, right?
No.
No, he was there early. He got there. He's one of the first people there. Like
Oh, okay.
he was punctual. That guy probably a Bitcoin conference in his hometown of Miami. He had probably 15 functions he had to hit. But look, the first thing he did was come hang out with the plebs for 2 hours, and yeah, that was really cool of him to do.
Hey,
Breedlove
Joe's
is
in here. When do you guys want to
awesome.
bring Joe up? Because I would like to hear his the options
Hey,
info. Yeah, go ahead.
oh
That's
no,
for
no,
those of you
no,
that.
no! I was going to talk to Pub. I said, that sounds like a good story though. But life is all about feeling good, so why not, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I would also
we had
add that
fun with it.
Sailor in Prague did the same thing. He was, I mean, if the guy was acting, he deserves an Oscar. He's like, man, the vibes the guy put off is he's just one of us. He was totally humble and like completely unassuming. I mean, kind of even a little bit shy with people and really like
Who are
genuinely
you talking
interested
about?
in people, asking
Justin?
questions about them, like completely legit.
Sailor. Omar's
Sailor?
buddies with him, right? Omar, you're buddies with him, right?
Yeah, he's in DC. He lives in DC, and we live like 3 blocks apart. Aside, I mean, when he's in DC, we're 3 blocks away from one another. And he comes to him. He comes. He's been coming to my club since 2002. So yeah, we know each other. We don't, again, we don't have a Bitcoin relationship per se because um we just never talked about Bitcoin. But I know the guy that Orange built him, Eric Weiss. Um, I've known him for a long time as well. But
Omar, you own a few clubs, right? And how many
yeah, I
clubs?
have 2 restaurants and 3 nightclubs in DC, and he's been one of my regulars for quite some time. He's quite a party guy, and he's been really known in DC for hosting these yacht parties in Georgetown, where he has an apartment. So he has a home in Georgetown waterfront, where he parks his yacht, and he has an apartment also in Roslyn in Arlington. And he recently bought, I mean, not recently, but years ago, he bought a house on Pine Tree Drive in Miami next to his best friend, Bill Dean. Um,
Hey, Omar, cool, man. Hey, I usually come there every like month or two. I'll hit you up, man.
we're in
Okay.
DC.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Tyson's
please,
Corner, all that shit. Okay.
please,
Yeah,
anytime,
dude,
man.
Yeah,
for
we got
sure.
to do that because
And
I'm building like 12 to 15 franchise locations. I was there last week. I don't know anything about DC. I'm completely
Bro,
lost in that
anytime,
town.
anytime,
What I do know,
anytime you're in DC, hit me up. Anytime. We'll go
I
out. We'll
will.
have a
I
few
will.
drinks. I'll show you guys around.
make
It's
sure Asteroid gets
Awesome.
a nice haircut and a beard trim first because
I
he looks
just
like
got my hair cut. I'm not trimming my beard. I want to grow it like 3 feet long.
see homeless.
ZZ Top.
Hey guys, when maybe we should switch from the alcoholic type combo. I'm sorry that I started it by asking Pubby what number of beer he was on, but Joe is in
Get my
here.
Everclear.
Hey. Joe, we are I being number one ignorant of the options expiration. I know you commented on that side DM thing about a lot of people just not being aware of how these things work. Can you fill us in a little bit on just the basics of these options contracts and expirations and all that jazz? Good morning, Joe. Hope you had a great Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Merry Christmas, everybody. How's everybody doing?
All
Super.
good, man. Merry Christmas.
Pretty decent.
Okay, so is there something specific about the options expiring you want to talk about, or
I
just
know.
in general?
I think we were speculating on all sorts of stuff. I know there's folks on stage that definitely know more than I do. Just about maybe just the basics at first, and then things like we were trying to figure out how they were calculating the worst case scenario for Bitcoin, and just what it all means, because I know a lot of people freak out and think that the world is coming to an end and the sky is falling when they hear like $14 billion worth of Bitcoin options are expiring, which apparently they've already expired. So just fill us in as best you can for newbies.
Okay, so let's first of all, if you're a long-term hodler of Bitcoin, you don't really need to care about this, right? Like the only thing, if you are somebody who, like me, tries to follow, like, read the tea leaves of the market and where we're at, that's the only time this ever becomes important. But the way to think about it is that as options approach expiration, right? There is a component of the options contract, and it's called theta, and it basically is the time decay. So, at their value of relative options around decay, it very quickly erodes, right? So, because of the erosion of the contract, and because of the fact that people keep these contracts on like insurance policies, and let me just, if you're totally, this is way over your head, the way to think about an option contract, I was taught this way, and I think it's a good analogy, is think about it like insurance on your house, right? A lot of people don't use these as YOLO bets. Some do, but a lot of market makers, they use options contracts as like an insurance policy where they actually hope it doesn't they ever have to pay. It's basically to hedge their volatility to hedge their positions. So like you don't actually, when you have insurance policy on your house, you don't hope your house burns down. Nobody's actually hoping for that to occur. However, if it does, obviously that option would pay off tremendously, right? You'd have that policy would pay, and you pay a premium for that policy every year annually as you get, insurance. The same is true for long dated options, particularly year end options, right? Some of these positions have been put on for more than 12 months. And as they approach the expiration, you have, a ton of market makers who have to do two things. They have to, number one, figure out how to close and net out their books, but also you have to get ready to position for the next tranche that is going to be rapidly bought up, right? Which is the next quarter, the next year end, the year end 25 contracts. All of that hedging activity where everybody's jostling in a musical chairs sort of way to find their position at the table and where they're going to sit, if they're bull, bear, if they're just hedging, whatever, that creates a volatile moment. It's a volatile event in itself. And as options activity has gone up exponentially, not just in Bitcoin, but in legacy markets, these options expiry events have been a volatility event in themselves, right? So because of those things, I think most market participants, both in legacy and in Bitcoin, they have to realize when they're making prognostications of bets, and this has been true for years now. You have to sort of be tempered around vol events like expiries, because what is effectively going to have to happen is whatever side of the boat where there's too many market participants on, it's usually going to flip in the opposite direction. Right now, obviously, the market's incredibly bullish, right? So you have to have a sell-off coincident with that to balance out the book. So that's just my view on this. I think it's mostly just noise. It's nothing fundamental, and you're seeing it in legacy markets as well. I do think the big story of the day from a fundamental perspective is this move that is continuing, just relentless sell-off in the bond market. The long bond, for example, is nearing its 2024 highs. I think we're at 4.8. 484 is the high. So it looks like Fred and his view of crashing rates to below 2% next year. At least the market is strongly discounting that possibility.
Hey, Joe, quick question for you about about Deribit in particular. Are you surprised to see such a large options exchange being so heavily used that's in Panama?
No, no, and the reason for that is the majority. And I've said this for months. You can go back and play the tapes. The majority of Bitcoin's options activity right now is moving more increasingly to the CME, but it still has huge exposure ex United States. Outside the United States. So I think that's going to change eventually, but not right now.
It's just hard for me to imagine U.S. institutions accepting Deribit as a counterparty, larger U.S.
They
institutions.
don't. They don't. It's there's the Wild West market and there's the onshore market, which is why you see more pronounced moves in, I think, Bitcoin when CME is closed, because the Deribit traders take advantage of that.
Gotcha.
Less liquidity. I mean, it's just less liquidity, right?
Yep, I agree.
I like how you started that whole whatever we're going to call when you were describing that with, hey, this shouldn't really impact
Rant,
us.
rant.
Unfortunately, yeah, thank you. I didn't want to. That sounded a little rude.
No,
That's what
it's
came to
fine.
mind.
I ran all the time. I do it.
I thought it was a
But no,
soliloquy.
it's good stuff. Yeah. Oh, nice. Ooh, that sounds great. But there are a lot of degens amongst us, and some of us have, I don't know, funds and retirement accounts that we gamble with. So I think just for that purpose, I know there's a lot of people that actually do a lot more than that when it comes to the degen stuff. But another thing we were speculating about, and I know how you feel on this one, but I think it's good to have counterpoints, which is a lot of talk out there about the reason for the Bitcoin price falling being the current administration is actually selling some of the DOJ coins that they recently transferred over to
Oh my
Coinbase.
gosh.
Your thoughts on I know. That's why I said I know
It's
how
like
you feel about this, but
anytime we
I'm
have a
not
one.
saying.
And we're going to deal with
Go
this for
ahead.
like years, right? Like anytime there's a 1% decline, people are going to say the Feds are selling. Like, is this going to be the new? Like, literally, if it's not up only, Fed selling. That's the only reason the market would ever go down is the
That's
Fed
right.
selling.
Why would you sell Bitcoin
I smell a
otherwise?
bet. I smell a
There's no
bet.
reason. You buy. Hey,
Well, they
Well,
did sell, right? It's
didn't you hear
confirmed
what
that
he?
they did sell a little bit.
They're always selling. There's
if it's
always auctions.
if it's
The
going up,
government's like literally always selling
it's
Why
organic.
would the government be selling Bitcoin for cash that they can print? That doesn't make sense.
because
I'm
they have a
sure.
fiduciary responsibility through rest of the Restitution Act to go settle out claims that was seized. It's not their Bitcoin. It belongs to victims that they seized on behalf of others. So, I mean, there's a judge I'm involved in the case where we're just waiting for the order for him to stamp it, her actually, to stamp it so they can sell the Bitcoin because it's not their Bitcoin. The government doesn't own it. Just
Why
all
don't they just settle in Bitcoin? Why would they settle in cash? I mean,
who is
they're not
selling?
selling it. If they're transferring
Okay.
it,
So
it wouldn't be downward pressure on price. This is assuming they are selling it. Why would they need to convert it to cash and then make a cash settlement? Why don't they just transfer the Bitcoin to the wallet that was wronged?
yeah, so all the criminal proceedings I'm familiar with, they've always sold and paid restitution in cash. I don't, maybe I'm wrong in that, but I have not. I'm not familiar with the criminal forfeiture where they didn't liquidate it. They're duty bound to get the highest effective price. The U.S. Marshals are when they sell it, and then they return the restitution to cash. And the reason many times is I think because you have to pay out various different entities on a pro rata basis, so you can't return kind for base Bitcoin. Obviously, you can get a proportion of that, but it's not a bankruptcy proceeding; it's a restitution proceeding. I think those are all liquidations. So they liquidate the Bitcoin, other assets, and pay restitution.
Well, what if they illegally seized my home? Are they going to pay me back in cash, or are they going to give me my home back?
Who's they? The government? Why is the government taking your
Yeah,
house?
the government. I don't know. Why are they taking my Bitcoin?
They're not. They're taking Bitcoin from criminals that stole it from third parties, and they're paying the third parties
Well,
restitution.
that's a loose. If we're talking about, I mean, criminals are kind of a loaded term.
Do you
Whatever.
think that? Do you think the
I don't know
cartel's
why you
criminals?
have to.
Is the cartel criminal?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so like the government
I
has a
can make
ton of
I can make a good argument that the
the
governments are
government
criminals
seized
too,
a
but
ton of Bitcoin from.
let's not go down that.
Wait, say it. Okay, sorry.
Hey, good morning to American Hodl. Always happy to have the legend with us.
Yo, what's up?
Merry Christmas, Hodl.
I get Joe. I'm sorry. So what I'm saying is, why do they need to convert it to cash? Is there a regulation? Is there a legislation
Yeah,
that
it's the
says
law. The
that if I'm
marshals
wrong
liquidate and pay restitution.
and they can't pay me in Bitcoin though? That's the law. The law says you have to convert it to cash.
Well, a lot of the times when they seize assets, they don't just have Bitcoin. They've got, 10 billion in claims and they seize 2 billion of assets, including the yacht that they seized from the drug lord. So they sell it all and they pay you a pro rata basis in cash. It's very rare, at least to my knowledge, where they have only Bitcoin seizures and they have only Bitcoin claims. And also they have to pay, other vendors and people along the way who helped assist them in the investigation. They pay Coinbase, with forfeited assets because they have a hosting fee they charge. And I mean, but yes, no, I think it's actually
Well, that's all well and good. You can't pay me my pro rata share of a yacht. You can pay me my pro rata share of Bitcoin.
sure. I don't. If your point is that the government should pay in kind, yeah, fine, stipulated. Yeah, they probably should.
Hey Joe, do you know how much of that stack is still in dispute in court? Because I believe there's a substantial amount of that 200,000 stack that's still in dispute.
Hang on one second.
While we're waiting, let's get Ton River. I know you've had your hand up, Ton River, and then we'll get to Ted after that. How are you, Ton River? Ton River.
Toniverse.
Ton River.
Hi. I'm good. Thanks. So, I just online, so I found you guys hang out here on Space. Like you basically hang out here every day,
Yes.
Yeah, every single
even
day.
We have no lives.
even the Friday after Christmas before New Year.
Oh yeah.
That's nice. That's really
Never
nice.
stop. Never stop.
What else are we
Yeah.
supposed to
So
do?
yes.
What do you want me to do all day? I sit on
You want
spaces on my.
you,
Yeah, and this
you
is
want me to hang
really,
out
really
with
important stuff we do too. I mean, you can't
you,
forget that. This is important.
This is
you want
important too. Yeah. So guys, so I have some question that I had in mind. So because I'm not American, I have something to ask you guys. If you guys are Americans here, I want to prepare for next year. The question I have this question. Um, okay, because Trump, he will be the leader, and we know that he gonna do reserve, right? But of course, he not gonna say like, okay, we're gonna do it next month or something like that. I have two questions. So, uh, what do you see what as the best case and the worst case scenarios for establishing Bitcoin reserve in USA? I mean, how do you think this might progress under the current uh, your politics condition in your country? This is just one question. And the second question, what's your opinion on Jerome Powell about his recent comments during the last FOMC meeting? You know, right? Do you believe Donald Trump, if he come in office, would he influence him or Federal Reserve or any like high position board of Federal Reserve to support Bitcoin? You know, because I'm not sure if he need to like replace Jerome Powell with somebody who is pro Bitcoin, and uh, because of next year in January, I want to like uh, take a look closer in American news that come out. What will be the key events or developments that I can keep my eye on the track of progress? You know.
Tonover, we're gonna put the clock on you when you take the stage, buddy. No offense, but there's a lot there. I think there's Joe is good at answering these things, and he's probably tired of answering these things. I think going back to even what Omar said, I think there is information out there stating that a lot of the coins are currently still locked in some sort of litigation, so I don't think they can go anywhere. I think the strategic Bitcoin reserve is still up in the air, even though, even in this room, there's a lot of people that are, more certain, like they're like 90+% certain that it's going to go through. There's other skeptics, like Joe, that are thinking it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It sounds like there's a couple of different ways it could go via a presidential decree or through a political process where it actually goes through the houses. All are just theories at this point in time. About Jerry Powell in particular, there's two different people in this room that have a bet. I think Joe and Asteroid have a bet. Asteroid thinks that enough pressure will be put on Powell that he'll actually be gone within the year. So there's a
He
lot
could
of
be
stuff going
swatted
on.
out and taken out by a SWAT team.
Jesus.
No, I'm
No,
kidding. I
that's
don't
what
think so.
Frank Kruger said.
That's I'm joking.
Lauren,
Frank Kruger thinks that.
let me take a crack at this real
Yeah,
Secret
quick.
go ahead.
police.
Fast.
Go ahead, Puncher.
Fast.
Yeah, because
I will separate
I
this.
think it will be very difficult for
Yeah,
Donald
hang
Trump
on.
to make it happen.
Let's let Puncher weigh in here.
Okay. There's the seen and the unseen. The unseen would be an executive order that you never hear about, specific to the DoD, which applies to what's called misattribution and the source of funds and things like that. I'm not trying to get in an argument about it, but I do know quite a bit about what's moving along those lines. There's an executive order that is separate from the Fed. So Jerome Powell coming out and saying the Fed doesn't have the mandate to hold Bitcoin, but somehow they have the mandate to hold other, whatever. It doesn't matter. The Fed's the enemy. We don't want the Fed to hold any Bitcoin at all. It's the Treasury and more than likely the DoD that we're talking about here. So the unseen would be an executive order inside the DoD where for tactical purposes, the DoD has to acquire Bitcoin. The next would be something regarding the Treasury, where the president does an executive order overtly that you will know about and establishes some substance or some semblance of a Bitcoin acquisition plan for the United States. And then there's the legislative path, which is a much more uncertain and ugly, and I don't give it a good chance of ever happening, at least not now, where the political actors who probably know very little about Bitcoin capabilities, see it as a threat. They'll argue back and forth very publicly about, let's just take Senator Lummis's proposed bill. I don't give that too much credence or, as currently construed, chance of ever getting might get to a vote, but I don't think it'll be successful. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, Puncher, and I would go so
Yeah,
far as to
I'll
say
just
that
add.
the Lummis bill, she didn't write it. She doesn't know what it says. She's clueless in that regard, and I would say that Andreessen Horowitz and Multicoin Capital probably put that together for her, and
Dennis
a host
Porter.
of other Dennis Porter. I don't know, using ChatGPT maybe. The paid one, the pro one for
You're welcome.
200 that he can easily afford. Well, has zero merit whatsoever. It's laughable. It's crafted by VC crypto bros, and it'll never happen. I
Jump in
wish we could
after
just get that
Justin,
out in the open
Yeah.
and agree on
So
Joe.
that.
I'd like to get to American Hodl. I kind of know his stance just from listening to him enough, but a nice rant out of him. But then Ted, I know you've had your hand up. So after Joe, why don't we go to Ted, and then American Hodl. Get your engine revved up, buddy. We want to hear from you, Joe.
yeah, just real quick. So the I fully expect some executive order from the president on Bitcoin. I think it's very likely. I do not believe a bill gets through Congress in the first 6 months. That's just my view. And with respect to an executive order under the Defense Authorization Act, the president cannot spend money on acquiring assets without an initial appropriation from Congress in a classified executive order. I don't think it could even be classified. That would be subject to a legal challenge if he tried to classify some order relating to the purchase of Bitcoin by DoD. If he
But Joe,
did,
those budgets
I
are
don't think it would hold.
fungible. Those budgets are
Yeah,
fungible.
it wouldn't hold wouldn't hold any muster. It wouldn't even make sense, right? The whole point of it is he wants to deliver on the purchase of Bitcoin to send a signaling. So doing a classified order to purchase Bitcoin seems out of. That's my view. You can disagree, but I think it very likely is you get some sort of executive order that transfers already sees Bitcoin into strategic holdings and call it a day. Don't even have to go through Congress.
But Joe, if commanders inside the military say that for force protection reasons they need to acquire Bitcoin, you
They'll go
don't
through
think
Why?
the
Congress.
space
There's a
that you don't have to. The budget gets passed. Joe, the budget when the
over
budget is
congressional spending.
passed for the DoD, they don't say we're going to buy 40 tanks, we're going to buy 3 aircraft carriers, we're going to buy. That's not how it works.
Hey guys, I also think
Why
that
are we
it's
sending a
not easy
signal?
to. Hey, I don't think we can just take the DOJ coins because I think Omar pointed this out that a lot of them are actually locked in litigation. So they're perhaps claims to them and other reasons that the courts are deciding what to do with them. So I don't think we could just grab those and throw them over into the
Some you can. Yeah, some because if they have so to pay restitution you have to have identifiable victims. So a lot of times when they seize cartel assets, right? Like for example, cartel's the classic because you don't know who gave the cartel that money, who paid for that, that drug deal. So there's no way to pay restitution. Sometimes they take that money and they give it to like drug education programs and they earmark it for things like that because there's not an identifiable
Remember, Joe?
victim.
Remember when the FBI seized all those storage boxes that they knew were
Yeah,
being used by criminals, and then their move was basically like, "We have it. If you want it, you're gonna have to come show us how you earned it, how you made it." Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Yeah, and nobody does like they did that with the Silk Road coins too. No one's going to go forward and say like, "Oh yeah, this is the Bitcoin I transferred to buy that dime bag of oregano." Like, no one's
Right,
going to do
right.
that.
Joe, what do you mean they want to send a signal? Why would they want to send a signal that would drive the price up while they're accumulating it? I mean, they would maybe after they accumulate a good.
I think they want to send a signal to people like David Bailey and others that supported that, the crypto lobby that supported the administration, right? It's almost like following through on your campaign promise. You want to send a signaling. This is a pro Bitcoin administration. That's why folks close to the president, he keeps saying stuff like, "Oh, it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive. It's going to be big," which tells me it's not. It's probably going to be an executive order putting some Bitcoin on the balance sheet from some source, and that's it. Call it a day.
Yep.
You know, they're not going to waste
It's
congressional
it's
capital on it.
90%
Yeah, weigh in,
likelihood
buddy.
that we get an executive order SBR, in my opinion. But I agree with Joe that the most likely outcome is that it's going to be ceremonial at best. That said, it's still, in terms of signaling,
It's huge.
yeah, in terms of
Yeah, no,
signaling, it's a
but
big
it's
deal. That
important.
said, I think there's about a 30% chance we get a meaningful SBR where they actually are stacking a large amount of coins. So, those are the two percentages in my mind.
It also can take time, right? Like one of those things where like, okay, we did the first gesture right out of the box. In a year from now, when things settle down, when he's got a bunch of wins under his belt, maybe they throw it in some piece of legislation on stable coins, right?
Yeah.
The establishing the Bitcoin
I
stable.
think
You got to get something through
I
Congress.
think another thing that
you got it.
Bitcoiners need to understand is that you guys, all of us, understand the game theory better than anyone in the federal government by an order of magnitude, by several orders of magnitude. So, like, if you think like, why aren't they doing this or that? The things that make the most sense to you, it's because they're stupid. It's really just that simple. And there are smart people that are attempting to educate them about these matters, but they still really just don't know what they don't know, and like they don't know a lot.
Just think about the complexity of educating 600 sociopaths, which is what most politicians are, on Bitcoin. Just think about what it took for you to understand Bitcoin, the time and the effort and the work. And now try to do that. I mean, who would do it? There's not even an
If you,
apparatus
yeah,
to get
if you guys
to
want to
pay
read a
attention.
good report, you should read the report that Matthew Pines and the other guys at BPI prepared for
Yes.
Scott Bessent, who's the incoming Treasury Secretary. That report is really good. It outlines it very clearly. It gets the geopolitics right. It gets the Bitcoin game theory right. Obviously, it was put together by guys who are just like us, so they understand these things. I hope that Bessent and others within the administration will take it seriously. But, if they don't, they don't.
I prefer to get my news from Dennis Porter. Hey, Ted, I know you've had your hand up. Sorry, buddy, but go ahead.
Thanks, guys. No, this is kind of the topic I wanted to elaborate a bit more on. I mean, I have my own personal perspective that I think, given who's gone into the administration and it's the ones, they are in positions of power, I think they will be able to hold sway and actually move this. I think they recognize the game theory and they're going to make a move. Now, I know we can debate that for forever, but the question I kind of want to ask you guys and pose to you that I think is kind of related. Max Kaiser just posted recently today. He sees the Greenland move, the Canada annexation, the Panama Canal being also related to Bitcoin. I would subscribe to that perspective as well. I think that ultimately Bitcoin reserves will be a source of power in the future and could position the U.S. to be able to, basically dominate the whole North American continent. So I just want to hear your guys' perspectives. You thought about these kind of geopolitical implications and see if there's a connection there.
Well, how did he say they're related to Bitcoin, Ted?
He was a bit elusive to it, but he is very cryptic, I suppose, right? But he's saying that I don't have the exact post in front of me at the moment.
Max is one of those who likes to pretend like he maybe he has inside information that he'd like to share, but maybe we're not important enough we're not ready to digest the information that he has.
There's no direct correlation between Panama and Bitcoin, in my opinion. I think Trump literally just wants Panama back because, hey, we fucking built it. It's not like the Panamanians are capable of that shit. And so why should we turn it over to them and allow them to run it? We should run it. It's ours.
Why did we turn it over?
Right. It's just that simple.
Jimmy Carter.
And so I think, like, in context, though, in a Bitcoin context about the geopolitical game theory, the big idea, and this is why you should read Matthew Pine's report, he talks about this in there, but it's been known for a long time, is that there's a coming monetary reset. The world can see it, okay? And, countries like China and Russia have been stockpiling gold because the amount of gold that you have in reserves is going to determine the size of your seat at the table in the event of a coming monetary reset. Okay. Bitcoin is a way to leapfrog that. And, you effectively can dump the gold of which we hold the most reserves. At the same time, you monetize Bitcoin. And then you've left China and Russia holding the bag. That's the big geopolitical game theory going on here and why America would want to do this.
So I get that, and I'm guessing if you play that forward, right, and you're thinking, okay, the countries like Canada, Denmark don't have a seat at that table, right? Panama maybe not as well because they don't have any Bitcoin. All of a sudden, the U.S., if they do have 1 million Bitcoin, and these other countries around them don't, right now they're saying no. Canada's saying no. Greenland's saying no. But you fast forward 10, 15 years in the future, U.S. is sitting on 1 million Bitcoin. They have none. All of a sudden, they'd be maybe singing a different tune. So I think that's kind of the playing it forward I'm thinking about. So I don't know if you guys see it that way as well.
Well, Ted, who's saying no in like Canada other than the government? Loren, how do Canadians feel about that?
Hey, Hoser, we feel great, eh?
Greg Foss is in here.
Well, listen, we're about to subsume Canada, so don't worry, you little fucking syrup chuggers. We're coming for you.
Yeah, man. No, that'll be the best thing that happened, right?
It's time to
Turn
sober
that
up and
Reddit
become
into-
I
American.
saw a
yeah.
report the other day that Kevin O'Leary was going down to Mar-a-Lago to make powwow with Trump about creating a Canadian territory, and I was like, honestly, like as long as we don't give the Canadians voting rights, I'm totally okay with Canada becoming a territory. But you can't become a state. You can't have rights. Like you guys haven't earned
Actually,
the right.
Montreal.
O'Leary was saying
Montreal.
an economic union, something like the EU, as opposed to an annexation. I think that's what you said. But
imagine letting Canadians vote. It would be like suddenly, it'd just be all liberal. Like no thanks. We don't want that.
An economic union would only make us their sugar daddy. It's not going to be beneficial to us in any way. We need the whole thing, man.
Yeah, I'm guessing as states would go, that Canada combined would be like maybe the 9th largest economy in the 51 states.
Yeah, we need the actual land. I mean, you see what's going on in Europe. You have
We
one,
got to
two
be nice
nations
to
that are-
America's top hat, man. We don't want to piss these people off.
Let's throw in the Bahamas too. Why not?
The snow Mexicans will do as they're told, and they'll like it.
So it sounds like you guys think he'll take it before the Bitcoin game theory plays out. I mean, I'm thinking he goes for all of North America, basically taking the border all the way down to the Panama Canal. But I see it happening over the next 15 years, not immediately.
We don't.
I don't
we
know,
wouldn't.
though. I mean, it's like, do you really want to own Mexico? Like,
No, absolutely
really.
not.
It's
It's a
just an actual
massive
conversation.
liability. Mexico is a no-go.
It doesn't need to take 15 years. All it takes is a few members
Trump
of
sees a
parliament.
lot of waterfront property down there, though, Justin.
Man, do you have any idea? There's already been UN reports on. I've been down here for a dozen years. I love Mexico. I love Mexican people. It's an honor and privilege to live down here. If you could see my dazzling weather this morning, I'm looking at the arches in Cabo San Lucas right now. I shit you not. So I love it down here, but Mexicans, there would be militias everywhere. Everybody would be armed. They would never, ever accept that from anybody. And we don't want it, man. The foundation of corruption down here would take 100 years to overthrow that. There's no foundation. The United States wants nothing to do with this place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, if you think about Canada has only lost its way since. Did I get muted for a second? If you think about Canada has only lost its way since the Trudeau years. Before then, they were pretty much on par with America, and so they could easily be partners with us and whatever. It's an economic union, it's a territory, it's whatever. Like that's an easy one. But Mexico is a narco state. Okay, so like we don't want to take over a narco state, and it's just there aren't many resources in Mexico. That's the reason why we haven't taken it over yet.
There's some oil down here, and definitely incredible tourism and real estate. But there's no foundation, man. There's no engineering here. There's none of the stuff that would legitimize an ownership of Mexico. First of all, they would never go for it. They'd fight to the death over it, and we just don't want it. Like I said earlier, we fought over.
Yeah, they fought to the death over Texas too.
Yeah, that's different. But we fought, and it came down to who wants Baja California, and the United States wouldn't take it. Rightly, we don't want to defend all that 1,000 miles of coastline and zero and a bunch of sand and a few palm trees. So it sounds
Justin,
great to take it, but you don't want it.
you sure talk a lot of shit about it, despite living there full time.
No. I absolutely love it. I'm just saying the United States does not want to own it. It's a great place for us to come down and exploit for our own purposes, but the United States doesn't want to own Mexico.
Do you ever hang out with that Jimmy guy?
Yeah,
Justin?
Jimmy's about 30 miles north of me. We're going
Are
to
you
do a little
serious?
video. Yeah.
Nice. Cool, man. Cool. Yeah, I hop on his Sunday thing sometimes. Yeah.
Justin, I did business in Mexico for 5 years in Monterrey, which is totally different than southern Mexico. Northern Mexico and southern Mexico are very different. But the families are intact. The people are. I just think, for the most part, separating out the cartels and stuff. The families are intact. The people, the values are intact. But
Absolutely.
the government is total shit.
Absolutely
Total.
100% true. Socially, there are no orphanages here because the families are all intact. The families stick together. These are wonderful people. I can't say enough good about them. But the fact is, in Mexico, politically, if you take literally every single politician in this country, they are either A, in bed with the cartel, organized crime, directly under the thumb, they assume power under the thumb of organized crime, or they are B, dead. It's as simple as that. Corruption on every level from top to bottom. And you cannot get rid of that easily.
And these cartels, they take in kids. You could see, when we first went to Monterrey, the people were saying we haven't seen gringos here since 2011. 2011 was when the cartels basically came in and had day-long shootouts in the cities. It was insane. And we went down there and things were very peaceful, and the cartels had been pushed out by the prior president to like the countryside. But you would see kids, 9, 10, with these dead eyes, and you know that they were taken in by the cartels, and they would post videos on social media of them torturing other kids, cutting their ears off, cutting their nose off, and laughing about it. And these kids' souls were stolen by these cartels, which are pure evil. And I hope Donald Trump does. Those cartels, they assassinate kids in their spirit at a very young age, and they're just walking dead evil fuckers. And the fact that they're running roughshod over our border right now, that's got to be priority number one.
Yeah, don't let anybody tell you that the cartels are just kind of fighting each other for drug territory and they're trying to keep their cocaine sales up and all that. Like Puncher just said, these are absolutely the lowest low scum of the earth. They delight in torturing people and robbing them of their soul. And the good Mexican people are subjugated to that, and the politicians take money from them. They have no choice. So don't ever think that you could just, hey, Mexico will give you a bunch of money and work out trade deals and this and that, and it'll be a win-win situation and everybody would go for that. They won't do it. It can't happen.
Can I ask you guys another question related to this? I mean, to what extent this is a bit of the conspiracy theory mindset I'm in right now, but I mean, the moves for Greenland and Canada from a security standpoint, which Trump has mentioned in his posts. I mean, to what extent do you guys think that is a signal and, preparation for a World War III type event with China, Russia, et cetera?
Zero.
Look at the side. Look at the size of these places. Yeah, because with my job, I get to hit all these embassies around the world, and I see the American influence and power. Everything. We never left Germany, Ramstein Air Force Base. We don't. Anytime if you gain that much land, boom, you put a base up there. You just lowered flying time and distance between many countries, especially in Europe. You're absolutely right. And when Trump threatens these tariffs, okay, the Chinese now gaining control. The turnover 99 was under the premise that Panama would be politically neutral. And there's a lot of Chinese influence in Central America. I can tell you after being there, you see buildings painted with Chinese symbols. They're not in Spanish. And if Trump threatens a tariff, but they control the canal and what can get in, because the U.S., they use the canal all the time, obviously. This is totally political.
Yeah, and I think Panama is the kind of the nexus of the West and the East. Like the banks down there are HSBC and the big banks. Like I do business in El Salvador. All my banking is done in Panama for lots of different reasons. But that is kind of where the East meets the West, and the East is dominating down there. And the fact that they were supposed to be politically neutral with regard to the canal is probably the auspices through which Trump is going to make some kind of play in Panama, whatever that turns out to be.
I think if you guys look at Greenland or the Arctic Circle in general, like that's a very hard place to surveil. It's just so large. It's so uninhabited. It's so goddamn cold. The temperature is the environment is inhospitable, etc. That we probably will use Greenland for some sort of military projects. I'm not quite sure what, but we already do tracking of the Arctic. Like we don't need to take over these places in order to keep them secure. I mean, we're the police force of the world. Like we secure every place on Earth. There's not anything happening on Earth the U.S. military doesn't know about.
Yeah, and during World War II, we landed planes in in Iceland. So we could do the same again. If it's just about refueling airplanes and layovers and logistics, Iceland is perfect.
Yeah, we have
Hunt-
Keflavik Air Base there in
Hey,
Iceland.
Puncher,
Yeah.
wasn't it you who was asking Canadians about how they feel that Canada is going to become the 51st state? Maybe you should pose that one to Ben, BTC Sessions, who's down there listening. We can get his views on that one.
Yeah, I was just segregating out the Trudeau government and most of Montreal to Canadians in general. How would they feel about being part of a union with the United States?
He's just a listener, but I just thought it would be instead of just posing it to me, who's actually spent more of his life now in the U.S. than Canada.
Well, like Steven or Jim, anybody who whatever. My sense is that
guy.
we feel like cousins.
Asteroid, are you in the bathroom again, or were you trying to say something?
Hey, Loren, we got BTC Sessions and AermicanHodl up here. That's pretty cool, man.
Oh, there he is. Yeah, go ahead, Ben. What are your thoughts on that whole 51st state BS?
Yeah,
I mean, I found it pretty entertaining, to be honest. Just because Trudeau's such a dope, watching him flail as Trump makes jabs is hilarious, and everybody here wants him out. So that's an obvious thing. My preference would be for Alberta to be its own nation state. I'm all for more local governance, and there's definitely been huge rifts between not only Alberta but other provinces and the federal government. And so Alberta passed in the last couple of years the Alberta Sovereignty Act, which basically gives us a mechanism through which we can challenge anything that the federal government does in regards to things like health and energy and education and all of that. We don't have the same state rights that you have in the U.S., but Alberta's pushing hard for that to be the case. And I think, I mean, if you read The Sovereign Individual, written in '96 at a time when Quebec was pushing to separate from Canada, they posited that Canada would be one of the first large nation states to break apart into smaller states. And they said, even though at the time Quebec looked like it was going to be the first one, they said it would end up being Alberta because it's so resource rich and it gets just absolutely screwed by the rest of the country. And the example there would be each individual province has to make equalization payments to the other provinces if they have a budget surplus. And so Francis Pouliot is from Quebec and Dave Bradley. They were both working together on Bull Bitcoin for a period of time, and they were having a meal, and they were talking about equalization payments, one from Alberta, one from Quebec, and they looked up whether or not it was a big deal. And the one year Alberta had like a $10 billion budget surplus, or rather $10 billion in equalization payments that it paid out. And they looked up Quebec's, what they received in equalization payments, and it was like $11 billion. So basically the province paid for Quebec to exist. And so, yeah, Alberta, I would say there's going to be major tensions in the years to come, although maybe less so with a change of prime minister, but I feel like if anybody goes, we would be the first to go.
Is the lieutenant governor of Alberta is awesome. She's Salma Lakhani. Is that right, Sessions?
No, so her name is she's Danielle Smith, but she's definitely the one she's been pushing for all of this, like more sovereignty of the province versus everything else, and she's been a huge thorn in Trudeau's side, and she got individually invited to the inauguration coming up in January.
Right.
Yeah, so it should be
Well,
interesting.
she's a stud, and she's by the way, she's making it almost a no-brainer for like Meta and Micron and all these big chip companies and all these AI companies to come up there to get massive amounts of energy. They'll fast track you on permits to operate up there. You've got low cost energy, you've got an educated populace, you've got a workforce. I mean, it's a no brainer. And if anybody is in those spaces, Bitcoin mining, Alberta is the place.
And she's a Bitcoiner too. She's a Bitcoiner. She back in kind of like the 2017 cycle, she used to have like a radio show in Alberta, and she had myself on 3 times to talk about Bitcoin, and she also had Francis Pouliot on and Dave Bradley. And she's also in Alberta. We have Steve from Upstream Data, and they do like the portable skids of miners out to cap oil wells and mine there. And she's been out to his facility, so like she's privy to how this all plays in, and being energy rich, how Bitcoin could benefit us. So I wouldn't be surprised to see moves made there.
And our buddy Francis and our buddy Jeff Booth are good friends.
Yep. And Dave Bradley, and you talking about Steve Barber?
Steve Barber, yep.
Yep. Good guys. Hey, Loren, you see Jimmy's got his hand up. Jimmy has been down here in Baja for many, many years. Did you hear what I was saying about Mexico, Jimmy?
Yeah, I was listening. I'm driving. I'm right now in downtown. Well, I'm not driving now. I'm parked, but I was in downtown La Paz. And yeah, it's about 80 degrees today. Gorgeous day here. And yeah, I thought I'd just jump in real quick and offer. If you guys want to know more about Mexico, I mean, real fact, and I'm not trying to shill it, you can DM me anytime. I've been down here for over 35 years. I've been Mexican for over 20 years. And I'm still pro-America. I mean, I'm not like, I'm here because I hate America at all. Having this where now I dual citizen, and now America's going to put tariffs on Mexico. Hey, that's fair is fair. Business is business. But the idea of America adding Canada or Mexico is absolutely absurd to me, because what I believe America should be looking at is cutting itself into 3 fucking countries. Mexico should do the same. I don't believe we do very good with governance at scale. Everything scaled up is centralized. It's fucked, whether it's food, and you guys sit there and make your cartel jokes. Hey, you don't have cartels in America? It's called food cartel. It's called pharmacy cartel. You got more fucking cartels than anybody, as far as I'm concerned. It's all fucked
Congress.
Up.
Our cartel is Congress.
I know. It's absurd. So, I mean, yes, we have horrible corruption. There's no doubt. And yes, some of these guys are real sicarios, really sick fuckers. There's no doubt about that. But wake up. You got that in America too, folks. San Diego has become more dangerous than La Paz. It's insane. I grew up in Southern California. I know what I'm talking
club criminals.
Yeah, it's really bad. But, just the point is, don't believe anywhere you're at is safe. There's so much shit going on in the world. You got to keep your head on a swivel, and you can't just assume. But I will say this about parts of Mexico and parts of America. In these big countries, you can hide and you can fly under the radar much easier than you can in the small countries. I had friends who were in El Salvador during COVID. Some of their kids, 2 of them got vaxxed without their permission. Here's El Salvador. Everybody loves it. Bitcoin or well, careful. Costa Rica, same thing. They ran from Costa Rica and El Salvador because of this vax problem. So in Mexico, they couldn't even begin to put in a vax program. They tried. Of course, we had vaccines, but there was no forced vaccine. They couldn't do it if they wanted to. That's why I like the country. It's not because it's great. It's because it's inefficient and its bureaucracy. They trip over themselves. And I can live here in the frontier of Mexico in beautiful setting, and nobody fucks with us. The federal government is barely here, and the cartels are barely here. What you want to do is stay away from the tourist areas. Where Justin's at down in Cabo, he's way more unsafe there than
Yeah,
he is here.
absolutely, Jimmy. I lived in La Paz for 4 years, and there's a reason I have to be down here. But hey, La Paz is the same exact population as Sacramento, California. So you have people in California all the time who are saying, "You raise kids down there, it's dangerous. They'll cut your head off down there." La Paz is the same exact population as Sacramento, California. Compare the violent crime rates there. There was one murder in La Paz, and it was a neighbor who got drunk and had a long-standing battle with another guy in the neighborhood, and they got in a fist fight, and he hit his head on the curb. So,
well, back in 2011, they had one of their first murders, and that was during the time you guys were talking about, where Ensenada, Tijuana, they had a lot of cartel, and it all had to do with the vacuum that was created because they got the kingpin, Chapo. And by getting Chapo and putting him in jail, they created this vacuum. And so they fought and fought. And now the new generation basically runs the Southern Peninsula. Everybody's okay with that. Nobody's fighting. There's no territorial battles. The problem with Cabo and the tourist areas, during COVID, they got more of an establishment. You don't know this as a resident down there, but many of the businesses, strip clubs, the people selling vapes or cigarettes in the street, they all have to pay to do this. They're small stores. They're charging like they do in Cancun. And it's this pay to play that is just disgusting.
Oh, Jimmy, it's every single restaurant, man. It's the family-run restaurants, and they're under direct.
They don't do that in La Paz. They
right,
wouldn't dare.
absolutely.
They get established. They will not allow that to happen in La Paz. And there's some cities and some areas you can just know they're not going to fuck with those cities. Merida is one of them because that's where the cartel kids all go to school. All the cartel kids. So
yeah,
it's like
anybody listening wants to come down to Mexico and really do it right, send Jimmy or I a message, and we'll tell you where to go. That is incredibly peaceful and beautiful. There's not a bunch of people there. It's totally safe, and you'll do it for 25 cents on the dollar compared to Cabo.
We've heard from the basement, and regardless of what you guys are saying about pitching, it sounds like you may be pitching Mexico here. But anyway, we've got another guy from the attic, BJ. How are you doing? I don't know how much of this you've heard, but we've been talking about the 51st state a little bit.
Yeah, hey, I'm good, man. I just want to know, have we joined the United States yet? Because it sounds like it's going to be inevitable. The only thing that, and probably heard me say this, I'm actually for it, and I've never seen, all my years in Canada, it's always been somewhat adversarial towards the United States in terms of, that's, like, it's a weird relationship we have. Culturally, we're very similar, but there's a definite divide of the United States of America is the United States of America, where Canada, even though all our influences and media are from the United States. So it's a weird dynamic for us. But so that's part of the reason we always wanted to have our sovereignty, I guess you'd call it. But I have never seen such appetite for even considering this. 20 years ago, this would have been a non-starter. Now I have Canadians telling me, yeah, maybe we should, at least considering it, which I suggest, whatever you do, we cannot have Canada as a 51st state. At most, it could be a territory because you cannot trust us to vote because all we do is vote in idiot communists. So maybe you guys would be our salvation to prevent that from happening. But it's just really interesting to see how people's minds have changed here. And I think that's because, you see with Trudeau is basically the embodiment of liberal ideology in terms of the Liberal Party in Canada. And even those people have, they've now exhausted their support for Trudeau. They don't know where to turn, and they're just throwing their hands up saying, yeah, maybe we should just join them at this point. It's really kind of interesting.
Did we just get rugged? I think we went from like 600 and something people in
They're
here.
back. They're back. Yeah.
Oh, okay, they're coming back now?
Yeah.
Yeah, these spaces have been glitchy as of late. It's interesting. Maybe Hodl, you're unmuted. What's up, buddy? And just like that, he was gone. Yeah, I don't know. That was a strange rug. Maybe it was a sign that we're not supposed to talk about the basement and the attic anymore. Joe, I know you found that fascinating.
Hey, Loren, I can't turn my mic off, bud.
Yeah, something's going on with
What is going on here?
These spaces have turned into a
so
piece of
glitchy,
shit.
so glitchy. I had to
I've
leave and
never
come back a
seen
couple
that
Total
happen
times.
shit.
before.
I've had that happen
Oh,
where I couldn't turn off the mic.
We
And
no,
I'm
no,
like,
no.
in
I'm
the
talking about
bathroom.
where all the listeners
Bathroom, I can't turn
disappeared.
off my phone. I can't turn off my
It's
mic, and
coming
I'm going to
back
the
right
bathroom.
now. Everything's coming back right now.
Yeah, at some point it said that the space had ended. It's so weird.
really?
Servers.
Huh.
I'm on the
No,
toilet, and my
they're
mic
doing the
doesn't
whole
come
thing
off.
on a Windows 95 one server.
Windows 3.1.
Sounds
I
I
think
think
we're
they
reasonable.
good.
actually use. I think they actually use Google Cloud, right? Is that right? Does anyone know? I think they do. Get rid
Are
of
they
that
on a
Google
basic
Cloud dog
plan?
shit. Dude, Google Cloud sucks. I hate Google.
What were we talking about before we were so
That
rudely
was
interrupted
crazy.
by?
I don't know. I think Omar had his hand up for a while. And
Yeah, I wanted to say something about what Ben said about Alberta wanting to be independent. You know, that brings me back to that reminds me of a very famous interview that Henry Kissinger had done back in the 80s, where he basically said, and it's funny because the timing is interesting. He said that the day where the U.S. would want to step in and potentially be interested in getting involved with Canada would be if too many provinces would want to become independent, and the U.S. would never allow for the creation of newer nations in its northern borders, because you just would never know who they would want to develop alliances with. So America would be, I mean, Canada would be closer to becoming a U.S. 51st state than having the creation of newer provinces like, and we're seeing it already with Quebec. So imagine if you have Alberta and Saskatchewan and other provinces wanting to become independent and creating newer nations. It's pretty interesting.
yeah, indeed. I don't know what you did there, BJ, but I think it was when you were talking, the space went to literally 10 people. So anyway, maybe you can do the opposite.
Did I scare everybody out, or did the
It
feds
scared them
block?
all away. Yeah, the feds, the three-letter agencies were listening. Rugged
Yeah.
us.
Well, we don't have three. We have four letters, and they're even more incompetent in Canada. But what's interesting is when Ben's talking about Alberta. Uh, Alberta is what's settled by Texans, so it's very, very similar to Texas in terms of its culture. As much as they've advocated for independence for some time, much like the French have. They're very, very pro-American, and they often get criticized as behaving much more American than Canadian. So I think if they had the option to join the United States or to have Canada join the United States, to strip away some of the voting power of Eastern Canada, which is why we always get leftists in power, then Albertans would be all for it. I think it's just a matter of time, just the trajectory of how the world changes and how nations evolve. It's only a matter of time until Canada becomes some sort of territory or aligned region with the United States, sort of thing. It's going to be inevitable because we're sitting on so much natural resources, man.
Yes.
Like, if you got Canada
Yep.
and the U.S., then you have a major superpower, right?
True. When is Trudeau gone? Like, what is the I forgot what the political system was like up there and how he finally gets the boot or resigns or whatever. What is the time frame and what does it entail before Trudeau's gone?
Yeah, because we have a parliamentary system, we have a minority government. So essentially there's a coalition. And that coalition has been fracturing for some time. And just in the past few days, Jagmeet Singh, who is our leader of the far, far left party, who's been propping up Trudeau, has abandoned him. So we have no parliamentary sessions until the end of January. I suspect that we're going to go into Parliament and they're going to try to defer voting as much as possible. And as soon as Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, the far left guy, who's been keeping this government in power because he's on the threshold of a pension, believe it or not, that's what's holding this all up. Once he gets to the point where he can collect his pension, The very next day, we will have a confidence vote, and we'll be going into an election.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Pubby.
Yeah, it's amazing after all these years, people haven't really understood what Trump says, what he means, and how he loves to tweak the liberals for one. Okay, you have to know what he says. He says outrageous things. He knows about making Canada a 51st state. Well, first off, you notice our states how big they are, and you just look at the provinces of Canada. They all have their own needs. They all have different things that they need and how they would vote. And you look at Alberta. You're talking about it being like Texas. Well, you got British Columbia to the west of them. They're the ones that got all the ports. They're the ones that got all the goods coming in. You see, that's one. When he says, "Yeah, we're gonna 51st state in Canada," and look, the guy's not even in office yet. Hey, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna buy Greenland. Oh, we're going, and half of that is just like shots across the bow to the left, knowing they're just going to get so spun up. But the things he is, I think, serious about are the tariffs. Those I think he is serious about. So there's
Why
things
do you
he's
think
serious
he's
about.
serious about the tariffs?
I think that's his mindset. I think I think that that was part of the reason. Part of the reason I think that we had to go to an income tax. Other countries didn't want the tariffs. So they bribed, I think, our politicians way back in the day to go to an income tax and then not let them have to pay taxes anymore. Just a working theory, Joe. Just a working theory.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you could be right. It also could be used as a point of leverage in negotiation, right? Because he's trying to get us out from underneath uh, very unfavorable trade deals that have hollowed out the manufacturing base. So, Trump throws out a lot of trial balloons because he's a negotiator and he's a deal maker. And to your point, he says a lot of things, and I think he likes people to keep guessing. Do you actually think he's going to put in a 25% tariff? Maybe. I mean, you can never say never these days, but also it could be just a trial balloon to get people trying to think about it and trying to see what's the best deal I can get. The art of the deal.
That you're right, and like you say, the trial balloons is the perfect way to describe it, and that's why I think his idea for the Panama Canal coming back. I think he truly wants that. He doesn't want the Chinese controlling that separation from Central America and South America. Okay, especially with troops. If the U.S. is trying to trade down there, and they're controlling the Panama Canal. Speaking of the Chinese, he doesn't want that. So you got to you got those dovetail in together nicely. Get the Panama control back under U.S. control and incorporate tariffs. I don't know whether you agree with it or not. I think this is where he's heading, and he's got nothing. He's got 4 years and he's out anyway. He's really got nothing to lose now. You know what the other one was? So here's the thing, and this is like your trial balloon, Joe. The big thing was everyone knows he's going to build this big, beautiful wall, right? This 10-meter, 30-foot high wall. He's going to build this thing. And then what's he got to add on to tweak? Oh, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Remember that? We're going to build this wall. Oh, yeah, by the way, Mexico, you're going to pay for it. And it just spins up the left, the media, and he keeps them guessing on anything he's going to do. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I have
no,
no
I mean,
answers.
right. If you keep people guessing, that gives you some strategic advantage, right, in negotiations. I think that's spot on. I mean, that's exactly what he's doing. So, I mean, I don't, to be honest, I don't think he even knows what he's going to do on these things. I think they have a lot of ideas out there. He's going to, test things out, see what works. He's willing to break the mold of what people say is legal and traditional and orthodox, and see what sticks. I mean, it's going to be fascinating, right? I don't expect a whole lot of movement in the Congress, but I think he's going to try a ton of stuff on executive order.
So, BJ, I know you have your
BJ.
hand up. Give me one last question for Joe. And this goes back, Joe, to 1980. 1980, Ronald Reagan takes office, right, from Jimmy Carter. And we have the Iranian hostage crisis going on. Embassy taken over 300 days, 400. I got to look that back up. The exact number of days are in there, but there are rumors that Reagan had a deal in place to get them released after he took office. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that theory.
Yeah, and
Because
I also heard the theory that they released him after he took office just to embarrass Carter.
Well, that right, and here's the thing too. What do you think about this? So this is where I'm going in with Ukraine and Russia. Okay, is there a deal in place with Russia to embarrass Biden by as soon as he takes office? There's
War's
a peace
over.
treaty. War's
Yeah,
over. What
it's
do you think of that
possible.
theory? Okay.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, internationally, they all want to jockey for a position to be in Trump's good graces. I other than China, I don't sense a lot of antagonism, and I for one think obviously there was quite a hostile relationship between Biden and Putin, and I expect it to be much more. I won't say friendly, but I think much more of a working relationship between Putin and Trump.
Hey, BJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll shut up about Canada after this, but just want to see how you guys react. But to show how screwed up Canada is, and this is also another reason people in the transportation sector and commercial sector would be open to something with the United States. We don't actually have free trade. Now think about this. We don't have free trade within Canada. So to go from province to province, we have tariffs within Canada. Think about that. That's how screwed up we are. So if we became part of the United States, my guess, and that's been an issue ongoing for about 15 years. It was something that was raised during the Freedom Convoy because the transportation sector obviously has been frustrated with this for decades. And, if that was a way to alleviate this pressure and actually have free trade within the country, that might just be enough to put the big money on side with this.
Hey, BJ, what was your role in that, by the way? I heard you were like the guy or pretty instrumental in that whole trucker thing. I don't know if a lot of people in here are familiar with your story.
Well, honkingforfreedom.com, you can read my book and I explain it all. But basically, I was doing all the messaging, media strategy, a little bit of political strategy because I had run for the Conservatives in the past. So I knew everybody in Parliament, and just to try to get everything, on a positive ground as opposed to going there to protest. I tried to reframe it of us going there for the purpose of celebration and celebrating freedom, which is what ended up happening. So if you've heard the words peace, love, unity, and freedom, that came from me working with the team and trying to get everybody on board with, the problem is you're too adversarial, then you give the governments everything they need to attack you. And at the end of the day, we were just trying to get somebody from the government to come talk to us. That's all we wanted. Just come talk to us. Let's find some common ground. And I said in many interviews, I don't doubt for a moment, as much as I really despised Pierre Trudeau, Trudeau's father, because he also was ultra leftist. But he had the balls and the courage. He would have walked right out of his office, come to talk to us, grabbed a cup of coffee, and hung out for a half hour and figured out what we could do to make everybody happy. But we're led by cowards and fools at this point, and nothing that happened. But that was my role.
Describing Fidel Castro as leftist is kind of generous.
Yeah, his Pierre Trudeau was a very, very close friend of Fidel Castro, which is when I think you started to see some of the political animosity from the United States to be targeted at Canada for that. I don't think the U.S. ever forgave Canada for establishing relationships with that regime, as you shouldn't have. I agree with you guys. But that is what it is. So yeah, messaging, and then I was also the only person there who understood Bitcoin. And so when Caribou reached out to me, they had been trying to reach out to truckers previously, and some of the other people that were helping to lead the convoy just shot them down, described it as video game money. And then they found me. I think they saw me doing one of the interviews. It was GB News or Newsmax or something like that was online. And they searched me online and they saw my Twitter account, #Bitcoin. So I still remember it like it was yesterday. I start getting these DMs. I was getting thousands of them, but finally I got one from a Bitcoiner, an anon, with hashtag Bitcoin and saying, "Are you a Bitcoiner?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so we went back and forth, and he asked me, "What wallet do you use? When do you get into Bitcoin?" And because I never talked to anybody in Bitcoin Twitter, like I always just kind of did it on my own, and I didn't realize Bitcoin Twitter was a thing, to be entirely honest. And so me and Caribou kind of did our best to bring Bitcoiners together, and thank God for all of you guys around the world who supported us, because that was the only money that was not frozen and got distributed directly to truckers. The rest of the $25 million cumulatively that was raised was either seized or returned or subject to injunction by the courts because of a lawfare case that we're still dealing with. They're still trying to sue us for $450 million. And if it gets certified, which I'm not sure if it will, but we may be in court for the next decade. So it is what it is. So sometimes you got to sacrifice, right?
Joe, you got the hand, brother.
Oh yeah, sorry. I really didn't want to derail the Canada conversation, but secretly I did. I wanted to talk to you about this list of Galaxy Research predictions because I think they're fascinating here. I'm just going to run down a few of these. Alex Thorne, I put one of them in the nest. Alex Thorne, who always has some great takes, and although I don't always disagree with him, I really respect his opinion quite a bit. So he's got some good ones here. I'm gonna throw them out here, just running down for conversations. And Puppy, if you're still with us and haven't had too many, we're gonna go through them. Okay, so number one, we want to talk about this prediction he has. Bitcoin will cross 150K in the first half of the year and test or best 185K in Q4. He says that Bitcoin EPTs will cross 250 billion in assets under management. That's a wow. What a number. That Bitcoin will be among the top performing assets. That's a no-brainer. Wealth management platforms will announce 2% or higher recommendation. I completely agree with that one because that's coming. Major wealth management platforms are going to recommend 2% Bitcoin allocations. He says 5 NASDAQ 100 companies are going, and 5 nation states will announce they have added Bitcoin to their balance sheets. That's interesting. Bitcoin developers will reach consensus on the next protocol upgrade. That's a fascinating one. Let's dig into that a little bit more. DeFi, Bitcoin DeFi, interesting. Ether will trade above 5,500. Thumbs down for that one. Ethereum staking will exceed 50%. ETH BTC ratio will trade below 0.03, but will finish the year up 0.06, meaning he thinks ETH is going to outperform Bitcoin this year. That's in 2025, rather. That's fascinating. L2s, blah blah blah. But here's the one we I think will spark a lot of debate here. I'm going to scroll down to it. The U.S. government will not purchase Bitcoin. Sorry, Puncher. In 2025, they will create a strategic stockpile using coins already hold. They already hold. There will be some movement within departments and agencies to examine expanded Bitcoin reserves. So, a committee to investigate the potential of buying Bitcoins. I think it's what he's sort of implying there. Washington loves to create committees and study things for years, file a report that nobody will read, and then have a new administration come in. Interesting. So anyway, I'll shut up there. But any response to any of that? Let's go
Joe,
to
Joe, Joe,
Justin.
that takes me back before I
Nobody,
forget. Yeah, go ahead.
nobody
Sorry.
ever erected a monument to a committee, ever.
Yet, the keyword is yet.
Well, the Truman Committee during the war basically made him president. That was a huge deal. That's how he got on the ticket. That he was very impressive in that wartime. You know Truman's rise to power with his work on the committee.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. So, Joe, who was that? I missed it. Who was that you were just quoting from?
Truman.
No,
No. Was it? No. He
Yeah,
was
no,
talking
no,
about
no.
Truman. He was
Yeah,
talking about
so
Alex Thorne.
he said that no one's ever elected a monument. Well, the Truman Committee, for those that don't know, you had this special committee to investigate national defense programs to root out corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse, and that's essentially how he got on the ticket. To become the vice president and later president. This backbencher from Missouri was because of his committee. So yeah, I mean, sometimes committees can have really profound influence on American politics.
Yeah, there's an exception to every rule. Dark side.
Exactly.
But
Now you're talking like a lawyer.
Joe,
Good stuff, Puncher.
Joe, Joe, when you're talking about how the government is just going to take the existing Bitcoin and put in reserves and then send it to committee, I maybe just because I've seen how it works here, I would have assumed that's exactly what's going to happen, because everybody in politics looks for plausible deniability. And who the hell wants to be the one to say, oh yeah, it was my idea, you know, I'm the one that's responsible for Bitcoin? No, of course they're going to send it, and it'll be over time. At least that's how I would see it evolving. You disagree with
No,
that?
no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know if you missed the early part of this space, BJ, but we were talking about, I think Hodl was in here, American Hodl, and others. And, my base case is I think that there's some, gesture saying, oh, we're going to take this portion of the Bitcoin that is out there that we're currently holding, we're going to stockpile it. And it's going to be, I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000 of Bitcoin. And then there will have committees to investigate further Bitcoin policies and procedures. But I think what Alex is putting his thumb on the scale for is that there isn't some broad sweeping bill that gets passed through Congress where they're purchasing, hundreds of billions of dollars of Bitcoin or something like that.
But Joe, doesn't that just that one thing set off game theory, right? So the United States, an EO, right, from Trump says we're going to, whatever it is, 150,000 Bitcoin, we're going to take it and put it into the treasury or whatever. Right there, that starts the game theory.
Yeah, we talked
And
about this earlier. It's signaling. It's a signaling.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not, and it's
right.
not like new money coming into the market, but it's signaling, and I think it's wildly bullish, right? I don't know why people would be disappointed in that. I think that's incredibly powerful signal to the rest of the world. Now, is that going to lead to some massive God candle? I do not believe so, but I think you'll get positive Bitcoin price action. Bitcoin will rise through most of the year.
And isn't that what we want? I mean, too much upward volatility can also be bad. So I think, stable, gradual growth, the government slowly getting into it over time, I think that benefits all of us, don't you
I
think?
agree. I mean, I think that's wildly bullish. You don't want, and I always say this, and people yell at me that I'm lame, but you don't want a God candle. You don't want some massive rip to $400,000, and then we spend 2 years painfully retracing down to 200K. Like that. That's going to be awful. Why would anybody want that? You want a
I don't
slow,
want that.
steady climb upward, similar to this year, similar to 2024. Slow, steady climb, some months of consolidation, building support, then you go to the next price level. You don't want parabolic moves. Parabolic moves are very negative for markets because what they do is they basically say you're a fool. You've got unbelievable life-changing gains, so you have to dump into the marketplace, and there aren't buyers to support the price at that level. So you have
Yeah,
what Bitcoin does, which is rip to
for sure.
20K and then retrace all the way to 3 like you did in 2017.
Darkside, sorry, buddy. I know you've had your hand up for a while. We'll knock
Yes.
some hands out here too. So go ahead, Darkside.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, just to unpack that, Joe. So his prediction is that 5 nation states will announce that they've been accumulating Bitcoin, but the U.S. will not um, accumulate Bitcoin. And I find that just rich, right? Like I don't see that. I don't see Trump assuming sixth place, not in a million years. I think that those two statements just don't mesh. I think man, from my take, you cannot be bullet.
Even if the countries are like Bhutan and
Well, they've
El
already announced.
Salvador and
Yeah, they've already announced
the
that.
Republic of Kyrgyzstan, like you think that Trump will care if he's fifth place?
Well, those countries have already announced, so I'm assuming that he's talking about 5 countries will announce, meaning new countries. But nonetheless, I just don't see Trump taking second, third, or fourth place in this issue, right? I just cannot fathom a
I,
scenario.
I agree with you. And the thing is you have to think of it this way. It's only America that is so pompous enough that they need to announce that they're buying Bitcoin.
Well,
I think what you're saying, Dark Side, and I agree with it, is if it's a major country sends a totally different signal than some of the emerging markets, right? So like I agree Trump wouldn't want to be second if China announced it, or if a G8 country, but that's we're not hearing that. He's just saying nation states.
From a game theory
We've got
perspective, why would you announce that you're buying Bitcoin?
That's the
as a nation
question. Why in
state.
the world would you do that?
You wouldn't
Even
do
if you're
that.
Bhutan,
You,
why
Because you're
would you
Donald
announce
the
Trump.
that?
U.S. has been mining
Donald J.
Bitcoin
Trump.
since long
No,
ago.
wrong. Donald J. Trump will 100% announce it.
Yeah,
He would not
definitely,
do it
Grant.
without announcing it.
But why would any other country do it?
Why would any other country announce?
Yeah, well, I mean, how do they benefit from announcing, tipping their hand of what they're doing?
Well, yeah, I'm not thinking about the other countries. I'm thinking about what Trump's going to do. And Trump wants to be first. He will make this his moon race. He can't get to Mars in his time period. He can get Bitcoin on the Treasury, and he will want to announce that. And he will say he's already hinted this. Hey, we don't want to be second in this game. Now, these other countries coming on, he doesn't even consider those runners in the game. So this is a way for him to announce first, best, make America great again, make our monetary system secure again. This is who he is. He puts his name on a building, and he makes sure everybody knows it's his building.
Yeah, let's go to hands again because I know there's people
Hey,
trying to
hey,
work
Grant.
their way into this
Grant,
conversation. I know Darkside's had his hand up for a while.
Grant.
Grant, somebody was saying you were on Fox News too. Congratulations on that one. Go ahead, Darkside. Sorry about that.
Grant. Huge props on last night. I really enjoyed your piece on Fox, and tremendous ambassador for freedom and for Bitcoin. Thank you. But I just want to agree with Grant. One thing that I think we make a mistake is that everybody views acquiring Bitcoin from the perspective of an individual and not a government. The government doesn't care whether they pay 100,000 for Bitcoin, 1 million for Bitcoin, or 2 million. In the grand, excuse me, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make a difference. And I would argue that it's easier for Trump to get into Bitcoin if it's 1 million than if it's 100,000. Right? The higher the number, the more attractive the investment. The larger the piece of pie, right? It's easier for him to convince people to invest in an asset that's in the process of demonetizing gold than it is to invest in a small cap. So that's why he would announce, right? The higher it goes, the easier it is.
That's true of all institutions. They would much rather buy Bitcoin, six-figure Bitcoin, than 40, 50, 30.
Yeah, that's my point. That's why Grant's 100% right.
I don't understand that. Why? I don't think Trump thinks like whether. I don't think he
He
thinks
doesn't
like
care about
that,
the
though.
price at all. Price
I
is
don't think
irrelevant.
so. I think it's completely it's nonsensical to him. It's like it's all made up to him. It's like
Let's try to get some of these other hands in here too.
why would he
So when Grant's
announce, Lauren?
finished, let's go to Frank.
Why would he announce that he wants to take over Canada?
Right.
Yeah. So, couple things, right? So I was thinking the whole thing about the nation states, making the announcements is that telegraphs strategic alliance, right? That allows them to basically communicate, without the quiet part being out loud, that they can work together using this alternative currency, right? That's the one. But the reason I wanted to come up to talk was because I was ultimately thinking, somebody mentioned earlier about how the governments love to have committees where they just kind of run on for years and years. And I think of Tom Sowell, right, where it was like, you talk about the government is really kind of its own separate adversarial entity made up of individuals that all have their own self-interests, right? And so if that's the way it works, that's the game theory in play against us wanting, to see something different and sustained. And I think about it like, because of that, the government's never going to go for the common person or actually with the common person. They're always going to go for the person with the leading special interest who's paid the money towards actually pledging to them, continuing to be there, because it's all this sort of weird scheme that the average person is busy just trying to pay their bills and hold a job that they just don't have time to call that out. And so how do, we collectively, and I'm talking from the context of the American, America, right? The United States of America. How can the individuals and the businesses, that are being underrepresented ultimately just from wanting, their own incentives, like how can we have that all aligned to where there's like an actual sort of deadline to get things done and the committee doesn't get paid until it's actually like resolved, sort of thing, right? Like, I mean, how can ideas like that even begin to be put into play to where we can actually see fair outcomes that kind of work more like utilitarian rather than unilaterally towards those who have paid the most to get in?
So it's a great question. There's a lot of ideas that have been proposed by congressional reformers to get them to actually achieve results. I mean, there's bipartisan, there's partisan ideas how to reform Congress. Things like, not forcing them to run for election every 2 years in the nonstop media cycle, which basically requires most of their time to be spent on campaigning and raising money. Campaign finance reforms, gerrymandering reforms. I mean, you can go down the list of how to make a Congress more responsive. The question is, like, are any of the things actually going to happen? Because the people who write the rules on how elections get conducted and what their incentives are congressmen themselves. So I'm all about like the idea of like, how do we fix the incentive structure for Congress? I think Congress is fundamentally broken and needs a major overhaul. And quite honestly, if there was one thing I wish, President-elect Trump would be focusing on, it's reforming how Congress functions, because I think Congress is an absolute disaster. And there's only so much under our system you can do to change things with the presidency. Even if you get a perfect leader in there to be president, the perfect man in the perfect moment, you have a whole system, a whole branch of our government that is fundamentally corrupt and I think broken. And we all focus all the eyes on who is it going to be, Biden or Trump, when in reality, what about the other, you have 400 plus knuckleheads that are sitting there in jobs that they shouldn't be in.
BJ.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I agree with Joe actually on this. I think I actually agree with Grant too. I think Trump doesn't want to be last on the Bitcoin thing, and so he will definitely announce a reserve, but he has limited power in terms of how far he can take that. He needs an act of Congress to buy more, and we want an act of Congress in order for that thing to stay. Otherwise, another president could come in and just undo it all. And the other thing I would say is that I this is kind of my thesis for cycle theory, right? I think we have one more cycle, and I think nation state adoption is the catalyst for that cycle. I think Trump announces a reserve, shoots the price up, kind of starts a race, but then there's a big letdown when it doesn't happen as quick as everyone thinks it'll happen, and then you see a crash, a correction, and then ultimately it will happen. It's just going to take longer than people expect. And I also think it's very interesting how the issuance schedule of Bitcoin seems to kind of coincide with some of these things. And so if you listen to Saylor, he talks about you maybe have 10 more years where you can buy Bitcoin, reasonably. And so my thesis is kind of like, well, in about 10 years is when we'll see full nation state adoption and, even corporate treasury adoption. And at that point, people are selling things for Bitcoin and trying to get it in other ways other than just buying it. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Joe and the others were saying. In terms of Congress and the presidency, I'll give you Canadian filter because I know from my friends in the U.S. it works very similar. I remember when I was running, actually, I was friendly with our Minister of Immigration, and immigration numbers were an issue at that point. So I remember asking him one day when we were out for dinner, I said, let me ask you something. Why you made a commitment to reduce immigration numbers, and you never did? Why aren't you doing that? And this is the same guy that was dragged through the mud when that Syrian baby was the dead body was found on the beach, and he's the one who the media destroyed his reputation because of it. And he said to me, "You don't think I've tried?" He said, "Let me explain how it works. We have the deputy minister, which is the bureaucrat, and himself. And he says, every day, I am sending a letter to the deputy minister, to all the ministry heads, that you need to reduce immigration in alliance with what we have made as law in Canada." And you know what they do? They just ignore us. We're just waiting for the next liberal government to come in power, and they'll keep doing what they want. So there's that friction with the bureaucracy versus the people who are elected, and that's one of the big obstacles that the previous Trump administration was dealing with, but all administrations deal with.
Yeah. So just one quick follow up on this. Okay. Regardless of what you think about Barack Obama, right? I think that the facts show he came in with a overwhelming victory the first time, and he had a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House of Representatives, far bigger majorities than Trump is currently working with. And I'm going to put this quote from him that I think that everybody should read and take to heart here. Obama is quoted as saying that he didn't appreciate how weak the presidency is until he was president. I think that is like a stunning quote, right? Like the guy that comes in with overwhelming majority, every reason why he should be able to effectuate a quote unquote change agenda, and he's telling you right there and there that the presidency is weak, given how the current system of government is structured in the United States.
I wonder if he said that after he basically destroyed race relations in the United States and the American economy, or as he was entering office.
Maybe it was because the IC came to him and told him he was Kenyan and they owned him.
There we go.
Well, if you're looking at the time, he said it in 2015. He said in 2015 he didn't fully appreciate how weak the presidency was before he won. And again, I'm not saying he was a great president or a good president even. That's not my point. My point is that I think even if you dislike the person, I think his values were totally wrong. I think he's somebody who held the job, right? And he clearly had an ambitious agenda that he couldn't achieve, right? So like the point that I'm trying to make here is that maybe Donald Trump's going to be vastly superior. And I think he will be perhaps, but the issue is like even the president, even the most powerful person in the country, has limits to their authority and their ability to affect change.
So it's a
But
weak
isn't that the
man.
point of the? Well, doesn't it show that like they wanted the government to be as weak
Yeah,
as
it's
possible
purpose.
that it
It's
couldn't?
purposeful.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the idea.
But
Yeah.
the see, this is the debate that goes back to the pre-Revolutionary War founding of the country. Like we don't want to give too much power because that power will corrupt, right? We don't want too much power in Washington, but we also want them to have an ability to affect things that we need to address, like real problems, right? The fact that we have a southern border that's porous, the fact that we've got an economy that is incredibly fragile, and the fact that we've got all sorts of social and economic problems. And the question is, how do we have a government that's effective, but that's also lean and mean and doesn't undermine people's individual liberties? And it's a difficult thing, right? It's a balancing act. You have to give them some authority, but it can't be too much authority because that will mean they'll trample on freedom and liberty.
Yeah, our founders were pretty clear. Listen to Washington's speech and leaving office. I mean, remember, our founders despised central government. I mean, they hated it. They saw it as a necessary evil, but a very limited evil. And then they warned us against the evils of central banking. And sure enough, in 1913, we fucked it all up. And
Yeah,
we
but the founders
charged
didn't
it.
have to deal with the issues we have to deal with today.
Joe, that's bullshit.
There's
That's not true.
it is absolutely not
Like
bullshit.
what,
They
for
did
example?
not have to
Like
deal with
what?
a 24/7 manipulative news cycle where they can cajole and influence people's opinions. They didn't have to deal with
Where the
a
Federalist Papers
populist.
are. Untrue.
The founders didn't have a sovereignty for every individual, that anybody who's within the voting age could go and vote. They had to deal with landowners who could vote. They had to deal with elections that were not nonstop like we currently had. They didn't have to deal with a 24-hour news cycle. They didn't have to deal with social media. They didn't have to deal with a host of things that we deal with now. So the
So
notion
now
that
we need to invert state rights over federal rights.
we did, it's called the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Have you ever heard of them? They changed the Constitution.
Yeah, and
They
how about the
basically said no
10th?
state shall deprive someone of individual liberties. So
Okay,
that we
what
did
about the
change the
10th?
Constitution.
That doesn't accrete power to the federal government. The Federal Reserve did that.
14th Amendment actually came after the 10th Amendment. So yes, it does. So it amended the Constitution from what these people who quote the founders did you fall asleep in the late 1800s when we passed these additional amendments? Because the Constitution radically changed after the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, beyond what they even thought. Most historians refer to the passage of
I'm looking at it right now.
most historians refer to the passage of the Civil War amendments as the second founding, because it radically changed the nature of the Constitution. It basically changed it from one where the states' rights were supreme to one where states had strong rights but not supreme. That's what we fought the Civil War over. States' rights needed to be constrained, and that's why we put in place federal amendments to our Constitution to say that states cannot deprive someone of individual liberties.
Joe, I got a question for you. I know you know people on both sides of the political aisle. How are people maybe on the more Democratic side What is their impression, or how are they perceiving what's going on in Argentina with Javier Milei, or are they just completely ignoring it?
Yeah, so it's fascinating. Like, most of my Democratic friends are taking a posture which I think is different than the first Trump administration, because they've seen this. I mean, even Obama was talking about this recently, that they've seen sort of this rightward shift. And the message cannot be, and this, I think they're not going to adopt the message because of what you're talking about, the international rightward shift. Almost every major incumbent party lost and got sacked in this election to populist rivals. And there are a couple exceptions, but overall, that's the trend, right? And I think the trend they're taking away from this is that we can't just continue to say these people are all absurd demons. They're all anti-American. They're all fascist. They all hate democracy. We have to pivot. And I think you have seen many of them pivot to recognize the populist force that's out there, and messaging has to change. And that's good, right? You want these people to abandon the bad ideas and to sort of learn from the mistakes they've had. So I'm optimistic that you're not going to see some of these Democrats do the policies that they did the first Trump administration, which was obstruct and try to undermine everything he did, and compare him to Hitler at every turn. My view is you're going to see more willingness among some Democratic leaders to figure out how do we work with this guy, similar to what they did with Reagan in the pivot in post '84 election. They tried, not to the same degree, of course, but they tried to figure out ways where we can work on common priorities and figure out how to make a deal with him. And that's optimistic. That's good for the country. I mean, that's a positive way of looking at this, rather than just how do we prevent him from doing anything at every turn.
Joe, what in the 14th Amendment inverted the power to the federal government? I'm reading it right now.
What's the
There's four
first
sections,
sentence?
5 sections.
Read the first sentence.
All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside.
Keep reading.
Okay. Well, that was the first sentence. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state provide any person of life, liberty, or property without due process
That's
of
it.
law,
Stop.
nor deny any
There you
person.
go.
Okay.
So basically, they're saying anybody in this country is a citizen of the United States. Okay, and
Yeah,
the
no kidding.
states shall not take any action or conduct which deprives individuals of life, liberty, due process under the law.
So how does that accrete power to the
It
federal
basically
government?
allows the federal government, by virtue of that amendment, to prevent state action which undermines a person's individual liberties or rights or due process. So
Okay,
that
so
previous to the 14th
oh,
Amendment, you did not have that regime. States argued routinely, listen, you don't have a right, federal government, to tell me I can't have slaves. Where do you get off? You don't have that right. We can do whatever we want. We have all the powers under the 10th Amendment reserved to the states. You cannot control what we do, and you can't say that it violates due process. That is not your role. You are a limited government. Sorry, 14th Amendment says you're wrong. We win. We're passing an amendment. We're changing the Constitution. You
specific to
states that are out of
slavery. But
control.
how
Hang on,
how does
you
that then
states that are out of
justify a
control.
Department of Education, a Department of EPA, like that's all just a perversion of what this says? I'm reading it. Nowhere in there is there accretive
Well, that
powers
has
to the
nothing to
central
do with
government.
that is not, the EPA has nothing to do with the 14th Amendment. They're totally separate. What you asked, how did it invert power? And I'm telling you how to invert power. It's saying states that to seek to undermine liberty and seek to undermine due process, you're out of line, and we're reining it in. And if you're doing that under the pretext of slaves, or you're doing it under the pretext of gerrymandering to disenfranchise people, or if you're under, I mean, we've had
Well, that
battles.
happens all the time.
Every battle basically that is we fought against states goes down to that 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment.
I'd say that's a very broad reading of the 14th Amendment.
Well, the courts agree with me. So go fight in
Well,
courts.
the idea of case law determining what's right and wrong is another problem altogether.
Marbury versus Madison. That's even older. Now you're going back to the 1700s. The concept of judicial review comes from the process of we allow courts to decide what is the Constitution, what does it say.
Okay, but all of that power, no one would really give a shit about if they weren't reliant upon a federal government to fund the state. That happened in
I don't
1930.
follow.
When you give the central government a printing press, they automatically become boss. Do you follow that?
No, I don't think that's accurate. I mean, the printing press alone doesn't mean they're boss. I mean, that's why we had to pass the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment is what makes the U.S. court system have the ability to judge state conduct as violative of due process. I don't understand. And
Okay, the guy with the money makes the rules. That's a universal truth. I mean, uh, and our founders railed against central banks, railed against it, other
if
than
the guy
Hamilton.
with the
So
money makes the rules, then any one of my clients who have been sued would basically never have to pay any lawsuits because most of the time they're sued by people with a lot less money. They still have. It's just it's kind of like one of
no,
those.
but if you were my
It's one
lawyer,
of
you'd
those
work for me because I'm paying
oversimplifications.
you.
It's not true. There are David and Goliath stories all the time where people with less money, with less resources, win. And we've seen this throughout history. I don't know how you can make these sort of they're just too simplistic.
You don't think our current problems stem from central
That's a
banks
different
and their
question.
ability to
Now,
print
now you're
money? Yeah.
changing. You said the guy with the money always
I'm really
wins.
not. I'm
Now
really
you're
not.
saying that
The
problems come
states,
from
the states.
who manipulation of the money supply. I agree with that point. That's a different sort of besides
I'm
point.
saying the states are now subservient to the federal government because the federal government funds most of the things that the states should have been funding.
I mean, if that were true, then during COVID, every single time a state government didn't want to follow the policies put forward by the administration, both Trump and Biden, they wouldn't have had any power. We know that's not true, right? We know states routinely still resist federal governments. They say, take your subsidies and shove them. I don't really care. We're going to do what we want to do in Florida.
Which state did that
Florida,
again?
Not really.
Florida said, take all your federal subsidies and
Me,
shove them. I don't
maybe
remember that.
South Dakota, but they can afford to.
yeah, but just the notion that I mean, listen, if you're going to decide, it's the same thing with education. Like like if you're going to decide to take federal money, yeah, right, you have strings attached to those money, and you realize that. But some people decide, I don't want that. I'm not interested in
Yeah,
that. I'm not
but
interested in the subsidies.
Joe, you're
So
making
so
Puncher's point, right? Like as long
no, I'm not.
the
It's
the federal government uses the kind of the anvil of the Federal Reserve Act and the fact that they have centralized the money to force states to do what they want to
the
do.
money's not centralized. That's
Oh,
just not
please.
true. It's not. It's
Come on,
absolutely
Come on,
not.
Joe.
Joe. Stop. Let's not
Joe, even as
slander
an
our
attorney,
intelligence.
you have to understand
The
that.
money's not central. The U.S. Okay, so we can go.
Come on.
We're all over the place, but if you want to go down this path, the euro dollar system, which is the global reserve system, is a decentralized system. People in offshore banks can print trillions of dollars without any oversight or control from the Federal Reserve. This is part of the problem. This is why the system's inherently broken because it doesn't.
It all stems from 1913.
No, it doesn't.
There would be no Eurodollar
There
system
was
if it wasn't.
Absolutely, it does.
there was printing of money in this country without federal oversight before 1913. We've had these conversations; they're kind of stale at this point.
What, private
Yeah,
banks
yeah.
they went bankrupt. They
So
failed, and you
even
lost your shit.
post 1913, right? There were significant controls on how money was created, and there was also people who just said, "I don't care about the controls. We're going to do what we want. We're going to print greenbacks." The system of money creation has always been a decentralized one because at its core, it's just a lending institution. It's just basically people that want to create money out of thin air through fractional reserve, and they do that routinely. So I don't know where you get this. The money system is controlled.
And then they fail, and then we're in the position we're in now, where we have to
Yeah,
have a
that's a
reset.
different issue. That's a moral hazard issue because of too big to fail. But you're again changing the subject. You said the money system is
I'm really not.
our money system
The,
is not a centralized system currently. It is a perverted, manipulated system, but it's not centralized. That's a different. They're sort of different
Wait a minute.
wavelengths.
that's like the communists saying, if we did it, communism would work out way better. It just wasn't us. So let's try it
The
again.
Fed,
It's the
for
same
example,
mentality.
the Fed, the people that you want to say are controlling the money system, they've cut rates, right? And what has the long bond been doing? It's been selling off. Yields have been
Why
rising.
Whoa.
why do 12 eggheads get to determine what the value
They're
of money
not.
is?
Look at the 10-year. The 10-year is completely
You
defied
just said
where
they cut
they
rates.
say it's supposed to be going.
Yeah, recently, because
No,
no one believes it
no, there are
anymore.
periods in history before. Look at inverted yield curves. Yield curve inversion is a perfect example. Fed can jack up interest rates, and the yield curve is
Yeah.
inverted.
Ultimately, when the system starts to break, because we've given 12 eggheads the right to determine what the price of money should be, it fails. But it takes a hell
You
of a
have
long time.
way more confidence in their abilities and powers than I think I ever will. 12 eggheads in a room do not control the cost of money. That is not true. It's we see too many examples of it throughout history. They seek to manipulate. It's kind of like
So they can't yield curve control, and they can't determine how much money gets printed,
Yeah.
and
No,
that
they actually
I'm
can't. They
imagining
actually
that.
can't determine how much money gets printed because foreign offshore banks supply credit to the system. And they can do that without the Federal Reserve. They can go say pound sand, whatever you want.
As an extension of the Federal Reserve. I mean,
The
Yeah,
foreign banks have
all
no
right.
relationship to, they're not even in the Federal Reserve System. What are you
that's not
talking about?
really true. That's
No, I
not
know
really
they're
true
not,
because
but they're enabled by the Federal
those
Reserve
foreign
System.
banks you're referring to all have large U.S. banking interests, and they're all
Correct.
regulated. They're
That's
all
true.
regulated by the very Federal Reserve that you're saying doesn't have power over them. Right?
The relation.
The Federal Reserve could shut down the euro dollar system if
No,
they
it
wanted
couldn't.
to. Absolutely
Absolutely
could.
cannot. There's
Absolutely.
no way for the, there's, I mean, you don't have to
They,
take my word for it. Go talk to Joseph Wang. He worked at the Fed, right? These things are outside the control of the Federal Reserve System. And yes, the Federal Reserve can cause an international banking crisis by shutting off all connections to the US system. That's always possible, right? But the notion that they control what happens in the Eurodollar market is, I mean,
they,
we see, I can give
Joe,
you
they
specific
regulate.
examples.
They are the regulator of these banks.
They are
All
not the
you
regulators of offshore banks. That
Yeah,
is
but
not true.
let's take UBS as an example. The UBS's largest division is an American division.
That's not an offshore bank. It's not what we're talking
Okay,
about.
so give me your offshore bank you're talking about. Deutsche Bank.
Okay.
Deutsche Bank's a U.S. bank. Every
Okay.
one of them is a U.S. bank, right? They also have offshore divisions that the Fed allows to get away with the shenanigans.
You have offshore. Okay, so let's go. There's just way too much for you guys to even focus on for 5 minutes. If you want to talk about offshore euro dollar banks, okay, many of the examples of these banking institutions are entirely separate from the U.S. branches. So from a regulatory standpoint, the U.S. has no oversight on the branch ex United States. They can look at the books of the branches in the United States, and to that extent, they are connected overseas. But the offshore banks have separate regulators they answer to, and those regulators, okay, do not have control.
Answer
I
to the
mean,
Fed.
like
I'm, I can't even finish.
you're
Like,
basically standing up here and saying there's no corruption in the world. These banks run
when have I ever
purely.
said there's no corruption in the
Well,
world? I mean, do you guys listen to
because to
yourselves?
assume
Like,
that a bank, right, that has a U.S. division and let's just call it a German division, right, that there's really a Chinese wall between those two divisions is laughable. It's absolutely laughable, right? Like that's not how the world works. The U.S. If the Federal Reserve wanted to bring down the hammer on any one of these banks, they could do so, and they would snap into line in 2 seconds.
okay, so you want examples, and let me just get a sentence out before you interrupt me again. Okay, so for example, HSBC, right? HSBC has written trillions of dollars of loans in the last 15 years, all outside of the Federal Reserve System. They're dollar denominated, right? Meaning that they have an effect on foreign currency rates, exchange rates, because they create a demand for dollars once the issuance of debt goes into the marketplace. Somebody has to repay those. Some of those dollar denominated loans are actually issued in currencies completely outside of the dollar. For example, of a HSBC's book, right? They've issued dollar denominated loans, which are actually settled in yen, okay? Completely outside of the dollar system. There's no peg for regulators to even care about that from a dollar standpoint. But from an FX reserve standpoint, they have to be paid back in equivalent terms in dollars, creating an FX bid. So that system I just described, we have $1 trillion. Let me just give you proper context for that. The entire Federal Reserve balance sheet, okay, what you guys think is the centralized control, the center of the universe, the financial world is the Fed. Their whole entire balance sheet is sub 10 trillion currently. Okay, so you got one actor overseas that's accounting for basically a tenth of the issuance of dollars into the marketplace, which you think the Fed controls at a whim, which we know they don't. I mean, we've seen too many examples of them completely inept in their efforts to control the marketplace. That's just one.
Well,
I
if
mean,
you're saying it's
Barclays
out
is
of
another.
control,
You want to talk about Barclays? You want to talk about the loans Credit Suisse, which again, outside the Federal Reserve System, they're issuing trillions of dollars of U.S. debt. I think it's something close to 20 trillion over the last couple decades. So, I mean, these entities are not meaningless.
how is this all enabled, Joe? Where did they get the ability to do
They can
this?
do it on their own through private commercial actions. It's just a contract.
I know they can. That's not the question. Where did they get the ability to create this money out of thin air in the Eurodollar system? What enabled
Nothing.
it?
They, I mean, if you want to go, if
Just magically
want to go
happen.
really far back,
So sans the
basically,
Fed, they'd still be
yeah,
doing this.
100%. In
Sans the
fact,
Fed, this would still be
yeah.
happening.
This is. And by
Interesting.
the way, this is a point that there's a Twitter thread that somebody was sharing the other day, which Lynn Alden and I went back and forth on this, and we were talking about this, and Lynn actually conceded, like, commercial banks print money regardless of whether the Federal Reserve exists, doesn't exist. It has no bearing on it. What the Federal Reserve does is when those entities fall, when they fall apart because they've all obviously lent too much or extended too much credit, they come in, they say you're too big to fail, so we're going to facilitate bailouts. The way they do that is through QE, trying to swap out duration on their books for bank reserves. But that is totally different from the idea that the Fed is the only reason we have printed money.
I don't
That's
want
just
to.
not right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Commercial
The
banks,
genesis of the Eurodollar system. I don't want to put words in your mouth. The genesis of the out of control Eurodollar system has nothing to do with the
absolutely
Fed.
not. Yeah,
Ever.
no relationship there. It existed. It
Okay.
existed before.
They just popped
It
in
it
because
ex-
it's magic. It
it
was
exi-
FM. F fucking
It
magic.
existed before the Fed. It'll exist even if the Fed no longer exists, because at its core,
You
yeah,
want to bet?
100%. You can't stop people from engaging in lending activities. It's a private relationship. It is simply the decision that I'm a banker. I have proper licensure in whatever jurisdiction I have.
I thought you were a lawyer.
No, I'm trying to explain this to you. Okay, hang on. Presume I'm a banker and I have proper licensure in whatever jurisdiction it is. It can be any sovereign state. Okay, in that environment, I can create money out of thin air. I don't actually have to have the reserves to back.
Denominated in dollars.
Yes, correct. So I can effectively print dollars without any constraint. Now, when does that stop working? How does that stop working? Okay. It stops working when there's a run on the bank. When there's a run on the bank and you have to pay out the assets that you owe because it's fractional, you don't actually have all the money. It's the old, maybe people watch,
So it's a confidence game. It's
maybe
a
people
confidence
watched
game.
It's a Wonderful Life, right? And you know that, Jim Stewart's speech where he says, "Oh, I don't actually have your money here. Your money's in Bob's house and it's in Tom's house," right? That is still the way our banking system largely functions. It's a
Who
collateralized,
bailed out UBS?
rehypothecated system.
Who bailed out UBS?
What's that?
Who bailed out UBS?
When are you referring to? They've had several bailouts over history.
Credit
3 years
Suisse.
ago.
Okay.
Credit Suisse.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So Credit Suisse had numerous entities actually participated in the bailout, and I know Darkside knows this.
And who provided the
So
credit
just real
default
quick,
swap?
Joe,
Huh? What are you talking about?
Joe, if Puncher and I went over to Lebanon and decided to just print U.S. dollars and counterfeit them in the billions and hundreds of billions of dollars, how long would it take before a bomb dropped on our heads?
30 seconds.
Probably it would never drop on your heads. I don't know what you're talking about because you're not
Why did we go into
you're
Iraq?
not you're not
Joe,
you're not actually print. This is the problem. A lot of Bitcoiners think you're not actually printing physical notes. You're not printing coinage. Okay, you're just giving. You have a bank ledger. It's just a ledger entry. So when I say I'm going to give $1 million to the Saudi king, right? All that it shows up is on a ledger entry. He's got that deposit in his account, and I've credited it to him. I created money out of thin air, basically out of thin air, and I don't have all the money to back that, right? But I feel comfortable with my quote unquote reserve ratios that I can effectively, create money.
I get it. So what enables UBS to do this, or HSBC in your example, and not the Bank of Iran? What's the difference?
The Bank of Iran does create loans in dollar terms. We know that. This is part of the Eurodollar system. I mean, so you want to know that the origin of the Eurodollar system really goes back to I think the late 1800s, so pre-Federal Reserve. And when technically we had other systems, but it really came as America came of age as a power, right? There was increasing demand of dollars, and then that only accelerated with the Marshall Plan when we were the strongest, big gorilla post World War II. So, this demand for dollars came in place that we were exporting dollars into offshore banks. And once they had some dollar liquidity, then they could rehypothecate that and reaccelerate it to more credit creation abroad, which is what we saw for most of the post-war years. And then oil obviously, played a huge role in that. That also created demands for dollars. Our insistence on, contracts being denominated strengthened it further. But the Eurodollar system would have come to pass regardless of the Federal Reserve Act, and that's where I completely disagree with Puncher on that. It's not. There's no
All right.
relationship.
Well, we disagree. We disagree. I know everybody's probably wants to stick needles in their
Yeah,
eyeballs
I'm
right now.
sorry
Do
for
you
the,
agree
the
with that, Darkside?
digression, but we started down this path because of the idea that you said that the 14th Amendment had no inversion of states' rights, and I disagree with history. Yeah.
Well, I don't. I just read it. I don't see it, but
It
you might
literally
read
talks
into
about
it. But
states in the 14th Amendment. No state.
so what? So what? It says the states can't just randomly violate somebody's rights. That's
Yeah,
what it says.
before that they could, which is an inversion of the
Okay, but that
power,
has
basically saying
but the creation of a central bank, which put the money in the hands of the central government, which was supposed to
does
be
not. That's
weak,
not
has
true.
nothing to do with the immersion of
The
power.
creation of a central bank does not mean that there can't be private credit creation. I don't know where you're getting this from, but that's not how money works.
I didn't.
If you're a bank,
I
you can
said
create money.
okay.
Hey,
Period.
Samuel, you've had your hand up for a
Darkside.
minute. What do you think?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention why does every state require you to be 21 years old to drink? That's a question for Joe.
From a public policy standpoint, are you asking me?
No, why does every state collectively have that same exact law?
I don't really even understand the question. I think because they believe, well, I think they believe that until you're 21, that you are not of sensible mind and judgment to be able to handle yourself with alcohol. I disagree with that. I think that doesn't make a whole
We can
lot of
go to war.
yeah. I don't think that makes a lot of
Hey,
sense
well,
from a public policy
it
standpoint.
does.
But
What he's
um,
getting at is the reason why the federal drinking age, there is even a federal 21-year-old drinking age, is because the federal government threatened the states with highway funds. That's where it all came from. Which get
no, that's not
yeah, it
true.
is.
That's not true.
I
Yes, it
remember
No,
is.
no,
specifically.
no, no.
I remember
Okay.
specifically being in Louisiana, and they
Okay.
refused the highway.
What? Wait, guys. There's a federal law. It's federal
No,
law.
there
What are you
isn't. It's
talking
not
about?
federal law. It's each state individually has it.
Oh, really? So you've never heard of the National Minimum Drinking Act of 1984?
That's not
You
a
never heard of that?
law.
What do
That
you mean it's
restricts
not a
the
law?
highway
It's a federal
funding.
law.
That restricts the highway funding. That's not an actual law though. It just
It
restricts
is a
highway
law.
funding
It
to
is a.
states who don't comply.
It's a law. It is a law that was passed by Congress. What are you talking about? First you asked why, and then I thought I didn't know this question was as simple as what is the law. Like if your question is what is the law, that's the law.
But the law is about highway funds, right? The law is that the federal
It
government's
doesn't
going to
matter.
put
It
its
doesn't matter if
boost.
the law is about cheeseburgers. There's a
No, it
law that was
does
passed
because
by
it
the
says
feds
it
that
does, Joe. They have the ability to force the states to comply because they're withholding funds that they print out of
no.
thin
First of
air.
all,
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
okay. Hang on a second. That is completely wrong, and here's why. Here's why we know it's completely wrong. Because when that was passed, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was effectively zero. Okay, it was passed in the '80s before any QE, before printing out of thin air. Congress would borrow money to finance expenditures, running structural deficits in the 1980s. So it has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. Literally, like that. Whoever thinks that is just it's preposterous because all they did was either tax or borrow. And by the way, when you're borrowing money, that is not printing it out of thin air. When the Congress says we're going to spend money on something and they say we're going to issue bonds, and then people will go out there just like they're giving Michael Saylor free money. They'll give the government money for a 10-year at 10% in the 1980s.
It's
That
not
was not
people. It's the
printing money
central
out of thin
government.
air. That's borrowing money from the private sector, and the government takes that money and then
Yeah.
it doles it out to the states.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, that's how it works. That's what a treasury issuance is. It's borrowing money from people, actors, and entities that want to borrow money. Okay, or they want to excuse me,
Wait a
lend
sec.
money. They want to
Then why
lend
does
money.
then
They,
why does the Federal
the,
Reserve own a quarter of all of our debt?
First of all, you okay? So how much money does the Federal Reserve currently have? What's the balance sheet? I think it's down to 9 trillion. Is that right?
Yeah, six trillion is treasuries, and 3 billion was the MBS that they bailed out the banks for.
Okay, that number is not correct because we've got the Treasury General accounts on the Federal Reserve balance sheet as well, right? So what's the Treasury General account? I think it's lower. But let's round it up. Let's say $9 trillion. Okay. Now, of those treasuries that were on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, how did they actually get purchased in the first instance? Do you know that, Dark Side?
In the secondary market.
Yeah. So some economic actor had to buy them, right? So some economic actor had, like a
Oh, come
bank.
on.
No,
Yeah,
hang on.
so they got the primary dealers to front run the Fed and then paid them a vig to do it.
Okay,
That's a ridiculous argument.
So no, it's not. It's because you don't understand the QE function. The QE function does not actually generate any new money into the economy. It simply does not. And here's why. I can give you a perfect example. If I'm a bank and I have $100 trillion worth of treasury, $100 billion worth of treasuries, and that gets QE swapped, the bank now has $100 billion worth of bank reserves. So from a bank's balance sheet perspective, the only difference that they have is that they have minimized their exposure to duration, which I know you understand, but actual dollars they have on that bank is 100 billion. They had 100 billion worth of an asset. They now have 100 billion worth of another asset. So from a balance sheet perspective, no new money has been printed. There's no new money generated by that QE swap.
Then how did banks get bailed out? Then? With what
But it
money?
enables
I
what
just
it does
explained
is
it.
it enables the government to print more money or issue new credit without affecting the bond market. It is a way of printing money. It's just a backhanded
Yeah.
way of doing it.
So you're. Let me just let's talk about where we agree. What you're saying is that the debt markets, the yield, okay, on treasuries would be higher had they not engaged in QE because they can't borrow effectively from the marketplace. Even though right now the government, can get short-term rates sub 5% as much as it wants. There seems to be no concern into that. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
I mean,
so
one of the effects of QE is we now have $7 trillion of
hey,
refinancing to do this year
okay, so let's
alone.
let's examine that. Why I think that is incorrect. The reason why your argument is okay, they engage in QE because there would be problems in the U.S. debt market. Well, take the COVID example. Before they purchased any emergency QE, right? Did any emergency QE programs, the 10-year was trading at 0.3%. So the notion that the US debt markets would somehow seize up and fail if they don't do QE, I think is fundamentally wrong when you had yields actually rise once they engaged in QE. And that's a fact.
So why
Every
they do
single
it? So why
time.
do it? Why do it at all?
I'll give you the honest answer, and this is not my opinion. This is, you can go look at the work of Jeff Schneider and numerous others. It's a psychological manipulation of the marketplace. They engage in QE. They pump us out because there's an implicit confidence game that the Fed's got our back. They want everybody in this room to believe that they control the vast $1 trillion euro dollar market, which they do not. And they want them to believe that if we're buying everything, then everything's going to skyrocket and it reinstills and reignites the economy. That's the belief. It's all it's a psyop. It's a manipulation of the marketplace to make you believe they are in control when they are not.
Okay. Well, who said this, Joe? And I sincerely believe with you that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of quote unquote funding is but swindling futurity on a large and massive scale. Who said that?
I have no idea.
Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, great. I think he also said something about slaves, but maybe he was right in this instance. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make here is
Well,
that
the issue is that they couldn't secede. Time out. They couldn't secede
Whoa.
from Europe and do away with slavery. They identified it very clearly in 1776 that that was an issue that we must deal with later, but we can't do it now while we're up against the monolith of England. And then we did.
I happen to
A
like
million
Thomas
Americans
Jefferson.
killed.
I don't think that because one person had some view that makes them right in all instances. That's kind of a
It was
simplistic way of
all of
thinking.
them, Joe.
No, it wasn't.
All of the perplexities,
It's not.
confusion, and distress in America rise not from the defects in the Constitution or Confederation, not from the want of honor or virtue, so much as from the downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. It was John Adams.
Yeah,
I can go on
and
for
there
hours
were
with
bitter fights.
quotes.
There were bitter fights going back to the founding about things like a national bank and the proper scope of
And there was
banking
one proponent of
institutions.
it, it was Hamilton.
No, okay, yeah. So I guess that one proponent was the only thing it required to get it actually through and enacted. So I'm sure nobody
No,
else
he
supported it
failed.
but
He
Hamilton.
failed.
Yeah, yeah.
It was done on Jekyll Island in the dark of night by a cartel of
This
bankers.
is not okay.
A cartel of bankers that hid their way down to Jekyll Island. J.P. Morgan didn't even go himself. These guys changed their names to get down to Jekyll Island. They were so concerned that the country would find out that they were scheming behind their back that they were fearful for their lives. That's why they went to Jekyll Island.
I mean, you
I
guys
just
can
getting
believe
back to
whatever
the
you want.
initial.
That's fine. I mean, I think a lot of this stuff is
It's a
it's an
historical.
oversimplification of our current system. And a lot of the
It's always an
hardcore
oversimplification.
libertarians believe
Common sense isn't complex. When you give the central government the ability to print money and fund the states, the inversion of power happens right then and there.
that governments had an ability to spend money and borrow money irrespective of central banks. This is where you're incorrect. Okay. You're just, I mean, before the Federal Reserve Act, we had debts and we had deficits. And we could have passed the same. Let's just take the gentleman's example, Samuel, the requirement to peg the drinking age $2 for highway funds. Let's just take that example. Okay. That could be done without the Fed. The Fed doesn't exist. They could still do the same damn thing. I don't know why this is.
So our Constitution very explicitly omits central banking for a reason. It's not
Wait,
explicitly
did
stated
you
in the.
hear what you just said? The Constitution omits something for an explicit reason. That those are you can't. It's totally contradictory. When you omit something, it's not explicit. It's an
It doesn't.
absence of something.
There's not an article talking about how the United States federal government is going to engage in central banking. And our founders, whether it's the Federalist Papers or their quotes or whatever, warned us against it. It's why it had to be done under subterfuge by a banking cartel. Andrew Jackson wanted to kill these motherfuckers. Everybody's probably bored to tears, but the idea, we disagree. I think that the central government becomes much more powerful and antithesis to what our founders wanted this country to be when they got the ability to print money. That's it. And you may disagree. I think
You
it's
know,
prima
the
facie.
Constitution specifically gives power to the Congress to effectuate anything, any law that is necessary and proper. It is purposefully
Okay,
giving
but that's not.
including the establishment of a bank, which is the necessary and proper clause. You know, Article 1, Section 8, right?
Okay.
I'll read it for you. To make all laws which shall
The
be
guys who
necessary.
wrote the document
There was not a
implored
guy
us
who wrote the
not to go down
document.
that
There
road.
was numerous
The
individuals. There's
guys,
numerous individuals.
our founders who wrote the document implored us to stay away from the evils of central banking.
Right. And guess what?
More
Guess
than
what?
anything else,
We decided that was wrong.
we fucked them over is
We
what we
didn't we
did.
didn't we didn't F them over. We decided that was wrong. We wanted to embrace a central bank for a variety of reasons. And just because somebody wrote it unites
Who's we? Who's we?
Yeah,
Who's
I
we?
agree with that question. Who's we?
our duly elected leaders.
Oh my gosh.
Funded by private bankers.
Right. So because someone is funded by private bankers, they must not, be our elected
Look
leaders.
no further
I
than
don't
big
even.
ag, big food, big military. It's the same shit.
Yeah, right.
They're
It doesn't
corrupt.
apply to big.
They're
It doesn't
corrupt.
apply to big crypto. It's only the people we don't like. I mean, come on, guys.
What are you talking about? No. Is there a
You're
single politician who feels threatened by crypto
absolutely
or
Elizabeth Warren.
Bitcoin in DC?
Elizabeth Warren feels threatened by crypto. She absolutely does.
Okay.
Bernie Sanders.
All right. Well,
We've talked to his
well,
staff.
because she wants to centralize the
Yeah, there's a
ability
lot.
to
There's
fund money.
dozens of politics.
We're trying to reverse. We're
You
trying to
just said
reverse
there's
the
no
perversion of
politicians that
1913.
feel threatened by crypto. Come on, man. That's not true. There's tons of people that feel threatened by crypto.
Because she's a corrupt piece
Okay,
of
but now you're
shit.
changing your
She shouldn't
tune.
feel
You're
threatened.
changing your tune to one of
No, I'm
corruption.
not. The guys who gave us a central bank were corrupt, and the people who want to enable it and continue it are corrupt. And
Alexander
Bitcoin is
Hamilton
trying to
is corrupt.
dismount.
Was he corrupt with the National Bank? Was that
He was
corrupt?
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was wrong in his
So
ideas
can
about
we
national banking.
agree that just because an idea is wrong or not sound or not implemented correctly, that doesn't make them corrupt and evil? Can we agree on that or no?
Okay, I'm sure she's a sweetheart. I'm
I'm not
sure
saying
she's the
Elizabeth Warren's a
best.
sweetheart. That's
Elizabeth
not what I'm
Warren's the
saying. I'm just saying
Operation Choke Point
uh,
2.0. She had the best of intentions there.
I'm not saying that she had one particular actor. Yes, there are crooked people all over the government. Everyone knows that. It's not the point. The point is that sometimes people make misguided decisions that aren't corrupt. They just are bad thinkers and not really circumspect.
Okay, so your assertion there, your implication there is that the people who got together on Jekyll Island had nothing but the best of intentions. The private banking cartel who wanted to consolidate power into their own hands, they thought they were just thinking about what's best for America?
I think some were, yeah. I think some thought that the creation of the Federal Reserve was going to
Who?
increase.
JP Morgan?
Yeah, I think J.P. Morgan, in his heart of hearts, thought everything he did was great.
Then
I
why
thought,
didn't he show up? Why didn't he show up and why didn't he use his name? Why did he send a patsy?
Because he thought that his presence and exposure would be counterproductive. It's what he said, actually.
Why'd the rest of them? Why'd the rest of them use fake names?
I think that some of them, again, I don't know what's in the hearts and minds of people that went to Jekyll Island, but there have been people throughout history who have done things that they believe that they're doing it for good reasons, even if they're applying sort of an ends justifies the means.
Okay.
But there's
Like
Were
there's
they
a
right
also
or
lot a
wrong,
lot of
Joe? Given
politicians
our current situation, were they
a,
right or
a lot
wrong?
of politicians do things with a mentality of that the ends justify the means. They're willing to do anything they can to ensure victory and ensure their prosperity for people. And this has been, well,
For
hey,
themselves. For
hey Puncher, can we
themselves.
let Samuel get in, our 17-year-old Gen Zer? Samuel,
Yeah, sure.
take a shot.
Yeah, Joe, the necessary and proper clause or the elasticity clause is meant to uphold the Constitution. It's not so Congress can do whatever they want. It's explicitly to protect the Constitution and to be used to protect the Constitution, not to do whatever you
have you
want.
read the Brooks decision?
Ye-
Have you read the Harris decision?
Okay,
Have
the
you read
decisions,
Edwards?
the
I mean,
judges don't change the Constitution, though.
they abs-
No, no,
the
no, no,
judges
no, no. They
the
can't do
judges
that.
interpret that. Come on, man.
They've
Have you
done it
been
in
to
the
law
past, but
school?
that's
Like
unconstitutional.
you're lecturing a guy. Okay, I respect your opinion. That's fine. You have to read the history of the Constitution as interpreted by the judiciary. The judiciary is the one who actually, under our system, going back to Marbury versus Madison, gets to decide what these things mean. That's how we put the system in place. They
Yeah.
get to read these
And
things.
and is it in compliance with the original document,
Okay,
Joe? A
that's
lot of them,
fine.
if you,
That's fine.
they make shit
Then
up out of
then
thin air.
go and they listen. This is the argument the Roe versus Wade people got right. Right? They went and take your arguments to the courts and argue before the judges. Who this current court is extremely conservative. Right? The current Supreme Court. They're more originalist than any we've had in decades. Go make your arguments that some of these things are not proper and that they're expanding scope of government beyond what it was intended to do. I wish you well. Go do it. Go establish
Well,
law
much.
because that's what
Joe,
case law is.
all right. But Joe, sometimes that's not practical because the powers that be, the corporate interests who get a lot of this stuff isn't even legislation. It's just different three-letter agencies, ex- issuing mandates that have no power of law behind them other
I
than it's coming
agree.
from the EPA.
I agree with
And
that.
and me,
So
Joe,
what's your
Six
point?
Pack, who makes 60 grand a year, who's getting fucked by the EPA for putting an extra step on my house, and some code enforcement agent who doesn't like me comes over and tells me I can't do it. I don't have the capacity to fight that
I
guy.
agree.
He has
That's
an
fine.
unlimited budget and the
Yeah,
government
I
behind him.
listen.
Yeah,
You're not going to pigeonhole me into some argument that there isn't executive overreach. I've said that routinely. I always say that,
but the
but
power,
that's not what we're talking
power
about.
of
That's
the
not what we're talking about. We're
I know
starting
the
down this.
power of the
You're all
federal
over the
government.
place.
It's a
We started down this
I'm
path
not Joe.
because you argued that everything in society goes back to the creature of Jekyll Island. That's how everything
I
got
never
screwed
said
up,
everything in
and that's not
society. No one
true.
ever said that. I said when you give the central bank or when you give the central government the power to print money, that de facto gives them power over the states. And we gave you a bunch of examples as to
Yeah,
how.
and I
And I
strongly
also told
disagree
you
with
that our
that.
founding
I
fathers
strongly
warned
disagree
us
with that.
against it.
Because there are countries out there that are federalist type countries, right? That they don't have central banks and they still have power over provinces and states because the federal government can borrow much more money and has better access to credit, and then they can attach
I
strings.
don't care
They can
about those
attach
states.
strings.
I
Hang
care
on a
about the
second.
United
They can
States.
attach strings to those dollars that are compulsory and force the states and provinces to comply regardless of whether the Fed exists, regardless of whether a central bank exists. The ability to
That's
attach
bad too.
strings to money does not have anything to do with the Federal Reserve System. That's the logical connection I dispute from you. I totally agree with you.
I'm not talking about the federal.
Listen. Let
I'm
me
just
just
saying,
state
Joe.
my view very clearly.
My
I
assertion. Okay, go ahead.
I agree with you. There is executive overreach. There's way too much regulation. I am much more in favor of limiting unnecessary regulation. That's my view. I'm also in favor of limiting spending from the government. I think the government spends way too much money. I know that people like the spending because they love entitlements, but the government just spends way too much money, and I think that has a negative effect on our economy. That being said, I do not, while I think the Fed has a negative influence overall and needs to be restrained and further controlled, and there should be amendments to the Federal Reserve Act, I do not believe that all of our problems in society stem back to the creation of the Federal Reserve. There are plenty of
I
other
think
problems we've made along the way and mistakes we've made that need to be reformed.
Okay. Nobody said all.
Not all,
Here's my
not all, just
assertion.
most.
My just most. My assertion is that all of these, all the pathologies we are currently dealing with, stem from giving what was formerly a weak central government the power to print money, and that has led to all of these perversions. And we got to fix them. And Bitcoin fixes it.
When the government borrows money, does it print money? When the government borrows, is you using that in the same sense, printing money?
Who are they borrowing the money from, Joe?
A private sector.
Through taxation, or through
No,
the issuance of bonds?
the issuance of bonds.
Okay. And who buys
They're
those
gonna they're
bonds
gonna
when there's not
issue they're
enough
gonna
buyers?
issue
But
they're gonna issue trillion plus bonds, right? Coming up over the next year, right? Somebody's got to buy that. Private equity.
7 trillion.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a huge number. Trillions of bonds. And someone has to buy that. And guess what? The Fed can't buy that. In fact, the Fed is doing the opposite. Since 2022, the Fed has been engaged in QT, which if you listen to Jerome Powell, which I know everybody thinks is a liar, but if you listen to him, he's saying our Q2 program is going to continue into 2025, meaning they're going to let more bonds mature and roll off the balance sheet. So who's going to absorb those $7 trillion? Because I think most Americans think that that is effectively money printing. They're borrowing money and they're redistributing it to people that shouldn't get it, right? In a lot of respects. So is that money printing?
No, but we'd be better off to just print it and not pay interest on it. What's the difference?
The difference is if you print the dollars, if you were to just completely print, confidence in the system would fall apart, which you've seen this. This is why
Joe,
the
the
Fed.
system has no confidence. If there's one thing you
Man,
can take from
that's
this,
not true.
you can
That's
take
not
from this
true.
conversation, nobody here has confidence in the Federal Reserve.
Well, nobody here has confidence in the. But if there was no confidence in the system, then why are most commercial banks abroad? Why do they still hold treasuries as their main reserve asset? Why is the dollar
Because they
king
want
gorilla?
access
Why
to
is
the
dollar king gorilla?
because they want
Why is it
access to the
higher than
SWIFT
it's been?
system. Because they want access to the SWIFT system. If there was
Exactly.
confidence in the dollar,
Because the
Yeah.
protocol, because of the protocol of SWIFT. That's why.
So
if there was such confidence
if
in the dollar, Bitcoin wouldn't be $100,000 going to $1 million. That would
so
make
if
no
you go
sense.
if you go back to the post World War II arrangement, right? The idea was that the United States would supply dollars to the world, and in return, we would provide geopolitical, hegemonic strength for all of our friends, and we would not help our enemies, right?
And we swore on a
And
stack of Bibles we'd back it with gold.
and yeah, we did. And we obviously went back and reneged on that promise. But even after we reneged on the promise, right? Dollar proliferation, dollar hegemony has only increased. Why is that? Because people have faith in
Because,
America more than any of its peers.
well, we put a Band-Aid on it with the petrodollar system in the 70s.
Petrodollar
And
system
then
existed before the 70s. But putting that aside, the
well, it
point
just
is,
happened to
the
coincide
point
with us
is,
closing the gold
look,
window.
you guys
And
always
we have
like
massive inflation after we close the
it's
gold
like
window.
talking to my kid, right? You always want to bring up, well, what about this? Well, no, listen, let's stay focused for one moment. The focus was on you. I think it was Darkside made I think it's an outrageous claim that nobody has confidence in the dollar and the treasury market, which, okay, look abroad, look overseas at the
Joe, you
absolute
buying 30-year
dominance.
treasuries right now? You buying 30-year treasuries right now?
Am I? No, because
Yeah.
but I'm not a normal
You have
person,
confidence
right?
in the
Like,
30-year treasury at 4%?
I can tell you I can tell you the majority of American retirees own a ton of treasuries. What are you
Oh,
talking about? Like they
Yeah,
absolutely
they're
do.
called the suckers at the table. They're called fucked.
Okay, you can say they're suckers, which I agree with, but that's not the same as saying nobody has confidence in the dollar or the bond market. There's
Right. They have
trillions of
misplaced
dollars of
confidence. They
people
don't
that
see
have.
what's coming. They don't see what's coming.
Okay, we can agree there. Let's just agree there. But that's not the same as what you just said a minute ago. A minute ago you said nobody has confidence in the dollar or the treasury market. That's what
yeah.
Darkside
Well,
said.
no, that's why the 10 years
Only a
That's
starting
cynical
not
to.
true.
base.
That's why the 10 years blowing out. And you started this by saying
Not blowing
the
out.
30
It's
years up.
below where it was 2 years ago.
Well, it's blowing out if you own them at a 0% rate and they're now going towards 5%. They're blowing out. You're in a
Who owns
severe.
them at a 0% rate? There was like less than 500 billion issued at that tenor. Nobody owns
Uh,
them at that rate.
Again, you're just focusing on the U.S. The whole world is indebted on long-term bonds that were priced at
Yeah, but
ZERP and
guess what?
NERP.
They're still buying bonds. They're still buying bonds.
Because
This is
what
in my
else?
opinion. Look at the
i-
tick data.
If
The
you
tick data shows we had one of the strongest years for people allocating to bonds. Now I think they are suckers at the table. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in long-term U.S.
What
debt as a
else are they
whole.
going to buy though, Joe?
That's right. They're just propping up a failed system.
what else are they going to buy? I mean, they buy stocks, blue chip
They
stocks. I
are.
mean, those,
Look at the stock
yeah,
market.
for
It's up
sure.
26% this year.
For sure. And at the end of the day, what is a treasury bond? A treasury bond is something backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, which is nothing, right? It's all just a confidence game. And what is it? It's cash with interest. That's what a treasury is. It's effectively cash with interest. So why are they buying cash with interest? Because they have faith in the dollar relative to anything else that is sovereign debt. So the idea that nobody has faith in the dollar, I think, what world are you living in? I mean,
Does
the
Russia
dollar
have
is the
faith in the
strongest
dollar?
it's been in as
Does
strongest
the
it's been in
world's
decades.
biggest nuclear power have faith in the dollar still? Is
No,
China is
but
China
who
buying
cares?
treasuries? Is China buying treasuries?
China is a basket case, my friend. They're teetering on a full blown recession over there.
I didn't say
Who
they weren't.
cares what China thinks?
They're a
Okay.
gigantic nuclear power.
So, are we going to use your nuclear?
Do you want to find out?
I think that
They
if
used
they
they
want
used to. I guess the point
if they want to create end times, they want to
the
destroy the
point
world.
is they used to
Go
have
ahead.
faith in the dollar, Joe. They used to, and there's very specific reasons why they don't. By the way, getting chased out of Afghanistan by a bunch of fifth century barbarians with our tails between our legs didn't fucking help.
Okay, let's stay focused on. I mean, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
It actually does. It's a confidence game, and nobody, not nobody, I don't want you to miss, more every day that goes by, fewer and fewer people have confidence in the dollar. The trajectory of where this is going is pretty clear to those who are paying
Okay,
attention.
if that were true, then how come we're seeing record purchases of treasuries this year, closing out 2024?
Which duration treasuries? On the short
Well,
end?
was that all tenors that have been issued?
Well,
I mean, look at
they're
their
not
tick
investing
data.
30s and 20s and 10. I mean,
They're not
it's
correct.
it's getting
They're not.
shorter
They're
and
not.
shorter and shorter, which tells you that confidence over
Yeah,
time is degrading.
I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it's more just games played by Janet Yellen to try to prevent the long end from rising too quickly. But I stipulate to that. I think that is a problem. That's not really the issue. The issue is if you're a foreign commercial bank and you need to hold reserves that are high quality liquid assets, you could hold U.S. equities to some degree, but aside from U.S. equities, you have to look to the sovereign debt markets. Do you trust El Salvador's debt versus the United States? I can tell you resoundingly, the market says no. We trust the United States over El
El
Salvador. Do you
Salvador,
trust German
El
bonds?
Salvador debt's up
Bunds. Do you
85%
trust?
this year.
Sure. So what's the
But Joe,
point?
will you stipulate to the
So
fact,
Bitcoin's up
Joe,
like
will you
Bitcoin's up several hundred
Joe,
percent.
will you
They're not buying
Joe,
Bitcoin.
will you stipulate to the fact that as we have shortened the duration and now really shortened the duration to the point that we have $7 trillion of our debt to refinance this year, that you bring the odds and the risks of a sovereign debt crisis substantially higher than if you had a nice laddered issuance?
I think the yields are mispriced, if that's what you're asking. I don't think there's any risk of a real sovereign debt crisis anywhere on the horizon. It's not even close.
Joe,
The
why do you
yields are
own Bitcoin?
mispriced, so the market's wrong.
No, it's just supply and demand dynamics. When you don't issue a lot of long end supply, you artificially suppress that yield, right? It's just supply and
There's
demand.
no demand.
So you think
There's
the
no
long
demand.
end?
No, there's demand. There's just demand at a higher price. It's kind of like, will you sell your house at 500K? No.
Well,
Will you sell it at a
you
million?
know,
No. Will you sell it at 10 million?
I'm
Sure.
so glad.
You'll sell it.
Listen, I'm
Yeah,
so
Absolutely.
but we
glad
can't
you just
afford.
said
We
that,
can't
Joe.
afford.
Joe, you just made my point, right? Look, Grant's on stage. Ask Grant what would happen if the 10-year goes to 6 next year, which is what you're saying. You're saying it should go to 6,
Guys, I understand the relationship with real estate and all these things. That
but
you're
it's
not
not
talking
real
to an
estate. It's
idiot.
banks.
I'm dumb, but I'm
It's
not a
not.
complete
It's not
idiot.
real estate. It's banks, right? The real estate's going to be fine. It's the banks that are going to fail.
No, the banks will be totally fine.
Oh,
Here's why: because you guys,
Just like they were before bank term funding programs.
yeah,
And,
majority
but
of the banks
Joe,
had no run issues. Like
hey
I
Joe,
don't. Yeah,
but Joe, I mean, isn't that a form of printing money, letting the banks continue to be all right? Isn't that just a new form of saying, hey, kick the can down the road? We're going to extend. You guys don't have to show your losses and hold your breath. Isn't that just another form of printing money?
I don't think so, and here's why: because when you look at the bank term funding program, what it was designed and put in place to do was to prevent any issues with respect to people withdrawing assets. So the whole collapse of SVB and other institutions really stemmed down to the fact that they had held to maturity portfolios, which means they were never supposed to market to market. It's held to maturity, meaning you hold it until the expiration of the bond, which average duration was like 7 years. And what you do is then you get your money back because they're good, they're money good, the bonds, plus whatever coupon you agree to. Now, the problem with SVB is that people, particularly in Silicon Valley, who were struggling through 2022, they were having to increasingly withdraw cash, which again, fractional reserve, they don't have all the assets to meet their obligations. They had to sell their reserves and they had to sell them at a mark-to-market price, Grant, which is lower than the actual money good instrument because the interest rates had gone up. So they mismanaged their duration exposure. And many other banks that didn't mismanage it, that didn't get greedy and buy, reach for that extra 30 bips, they didn't have any issues. And they didn't even have to tap the BTFP. This is more of, I think, individual actors gambling when they shouldn't have been gambling, and they didn't hedge properly because they thought, oh, rates are going to stay low forever. And they were wrong. And when you
You,
are
you mean you
gambling
mean
and
you mean they
make a wrong
believed
bet,
Jerome Powell? They believed Jerome Powell when he
correct.
repeated it
Yes, which he
over and
never
over
should
and
have
over and
said.
over again.
He never should have said that. That was probably his biggest mistake of his tenure. I totally
Well,
agree with you there.
was it a
Oh,
mistake
you
or
ain't seen
was it?
Yeah,
that. Wait till you see the lies that are going to come now.
yeah.
Well,
I think it was a mistake. He never because they truly believed that inflation was transitory. They thought that we were not going to have the 8% run. And then what did they do? That you saw panic from them in early 2022 where they had to engage and they still didn't move quick enough. They still, into late 2022 were doing those emergency 50 basis point hikes where they were leaking stories to Nick Timmeros to get ahead of the market. So I fully agree with you. I think they mismanaged that and it was very difficult, right? I don't think it was I think it was just their models didn't forecast correctly. And that's how these guys work. They all work with models and their models are usually wrong.
Hey
yeah,
Joe,
they're
if the
always wrong.
devil
They're
ever needs
almost
an
always
advocate,
wrong. But
Joe, he
in
will he
terms
is
of the
going to
present
hire
moment.
you, man, because you said we went to Jekyll Island to ensure the prosperity of the people. You actually said that, Joe, earlier. Man,
I
how
didn't
can this
say
be
that.
free?
Joe, I
I
got an
didn't say
honest
that. I
question.
said that people
Joe,
thought they were doing that. That was their view. What I was trying to explain is that a lot, I don't know. There aren't, I don't, this just goes to my worldview, guys. I don't believe there are a lot of people out there thinking I'm going to wake up and do evil today. They always apply this moral relativism where they say like, well, I'm going to do it because
Joe
it's,
Biden just pardoned about 5,000 of them.
I'm sorry.
Why is Joe Biden pardoning
Yeah.
thousands of murderers and
Yeah.
rapists? Do they wake up and say, Joe,
Can I
this
just
might
finish?
be
I just
just
want to
here.
explain one thing. What I was trying to explain to Justin was
Okay.
that I think people have this ends justifies the mean type rationale. They think that the U.S. system is going to be far more stable and under control if we institute some centralized system that can control things and we have power concentrated into the hands of a few. That's a good system for America. I disagree with that, for the record. But what I was trying to say when I said that is that I think when they went to that island, they weren't saying, let's all, get together the consortium of evil to do evil. They did it because they thought they were doing something smart and right. It could have had an evil result. Totally agree. But I believe most people justify this thing saying, I think this is good for the country, and I'm going to do it that way.
I don't want to misstate your worldview, Joe, but the idea that people are basically good is foolish. People are basically flawed.
I never said
It's
people were
easier to
basically
lie
good.
in a pinch.
I never said that.
Well, you say they have the best of intentions,
Yeah.
which is an extension of
Yeah,
people
I agree with
basically
that. I
think they're
think
doing the
people
right
are
thing.
acting.
They're
I
not.
think
People
most
are
people are
basically fucking
acting.
flawed. It's way harder to do the right thing than to do to the lie, or than to not cheat on your wife. And even babies aren't basically good. They're basically selfish. They scream and cry and pout until they get what they want. As a human being, we're not
I
basically
never
good.
said
It takes
that. I don't know where
hard
you're getting this from.
fucking
I never
work.
said they were basically good.
It's just a worldview that permeates. When someone says to me, "I think people have the best of intentions," I'm like, that's kind of silly.
I
Most
never.
people do what's in their
I
best
don't know where you're
interest.
getting this from. That's not what I said. I think that they
Uh,
were thinking from a mindset that if we put in place this program, or we do this, or we firebomb, the South Vietnam, whatever justification, whatever action people take throughout history, or if we
World
keep
War One.
we keep segregation laws in place, that keeps the homogeneity of our communities better. I mean, you can come up with any sort of rationale for things throughout history, and I don't believe people think like I'm going to go out and do something evil. They're just misguided in their approach. That's what I'm saying.
So I don't think the people who thought that black people were, subhumans were misguided. I think they're wrong and they're evil. And if they spent 5 seconds thinking about what's not in their best interest, but what's the right thing to do, they would have come to that conclusion. But Joe, let me ask you an honest question. If you have so much confidence in SWIFT and the Eurodollar system and the dollar, why do you own Bitcoin?
I own Bitcoin because, and I say this all the time, because I'm more confident than ever that policymakers will do whatever it takes to keep the system afloat. And my bet with Bitcoin is that we're going to see more of the same, not less. I mean, every time I come in these rooms, I hear you all talking about the end of the global order and the United States is going to collapse, and the banking crisis is going to rear its ugly head in Europe, like Darkside was saying the other day. I think no. I think the most likely scenario is we do not see any significant deleveraging. We see a lot more money spent. We see debt go up pretty much for the rest of my life. We see Bitcoin prosper against that backdrop because there's more and more liquidity, more and more games, more and more centralization, more and more, efforts to control capital markets. And by the time I'm ready to pass from this world, I think the world's going to look different in the sense that more people are going to finally start to wake up to the games that are being played and realize that it's a rigged system against them. But I'm not a big believer in like overnight
Well,
change. I think
I
these
think they
things
are
are
woken up.
I think these things are glacial. I think they move extremely slowly. And I think that from where I sit, I think we're just getting started down this path. I think it's going to get way
I
worse.
agree, but I do not think the people who go and get compromised in DC and who have a $200,000 net worth and then leave with a $30 million net worth, I don't think they're good people. I don't think they're doing what they think is best for America. I also don't think that the people who fund them, big ag, big medicine, big war, I don't think they're good people. I think they're
Well,
bad people.
I think some people are self-interested. Absolutely, they go to Washington. I don't pretend. I don't find it very interesting to say this person is this, or this person is. I can't tell what's in a man or a woman's heart or mind. Like intent is always
Nancy
difficult.
Pelosi, good woman, bad woman.
I think she started out with genuine interest, however misguided. I think she's been corrupted by being in Washington too long. I think she's forgotten why she actually got into public service. It's supposed to be about public service rather than herself. I think right now where she's at, she's basically desperate to cling to power because she has a ton of people around her that depend on her having some position of authority. So I think right now she's probably leaning closer to the bad people than the good people. But from my view, like you can go down the list. There's a whole host of people in Washington that I think start out going into the job for the right reasons, and they become corrupted by the atmosphere. And we know this throughout history, right? I know you love quotes, right? The absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I'll just throw that one back at you. The people that start out with the right intentions that go down a wrong path.
There's a famous road paved with good intentions, Joe. And I'll say is, it shows me a complete lack of self-introspection for someone like Nancy Pelosi to not realize what she's doing is patently wrong. You're giving her
Yeah.
way too much credit. I hope that if I'm in a situation where I went to DC and my net worth went up 1,000x, that maybe I'd sit and look in the mirror one day and go, what the fuck am I doing? I'm a bad guy. I need to turn this around. They don't do that. Never.
Hey, Fiat Fire, you have your hand up.
Hey, thanks a lot. Some of this discussion is a little bit above my head. I do spend a lot
I
of
can't
time on
hear
the
if he's
timeline.
talking.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I can hear
Can you
you.
guys?
I don't know if anybody else
Okay.
can.
Yeah, I can hear him.
Um, I've spent a lot of time on the timeline roasting, Janet Yellen and Gary Gensler and Jerome Powell, just because I don't know, just because it's fun. And there's a lot of, blame their way. But I think that, I really can't, I'm kind of more, thinking like Joe, that I don't think that there are people a lot of people who really start out with these evil intentions, and I think most of those guys are kind of misguided. I don't think they were trying to, rob everybody of an attempt to, improve their lives with Bitcoin. I think somewhere along the way they just don't get it like a lot of other people. But if I had to kind of go back to a time where I was going to, and I think like over focusing on that part of our like geopolitical world, it kind of takes some focus away from, I think there were times in our history where there were people like that. And I think that the people who got us into the Iraq war, I might put into that category. And I do often wonder what our world would be like if we hadn't been in Afghanistan for 20 years and hadn't gotten into the Iraq world. Like, as a country, what we would be like financially, culturally, and in a lot of other ways if we hadn't gone down that path, in the last 25 years.
Yeah, let's not forget that every one of those were enabled by what happened to Jekyll Island. 1913 was a springboard for all of that stuff. That's how they were enabled and empowered.
Yeah, and I think that to me, one of my main interests in Bitcoin is the way that those things have happened, like going back to the Vietnam War, going to these wars where the fiat system kind of enables that kind of spending on. There's always been a theory in politics that democracies won't go to war with each other because you have things like freedom of the press, you have this sort of like accountability from the people, but the fiat system I think takes a lot of that away by, you can tell the people that the Iraq war is only going to cost $60 billion, and then it winds up costing $2 trillion, because you can get money out of the system that's kind of not accounted for.
Yeah, and there's also a generational problem, right? Because you can spend for 20, 30 years, and when the actual problems start to rear their ugly heads, people are gone that made all those decisions, right? So you have elected leaders that can borrow a ton of money and say, "Don't worry, we'll deal with it later. We'll use that money right now to give tax cuts and to give entitlement program expenditures and do whatever we need to do with the money now, spend for wars, et cetera." And by the time it actually comes to roll that paper, interest rates are higher and it's a big problem and debt's growing precipitously. But all those people are gone. They got their money, they got out, they, had their fun time in public office, and they get to write books and talk about how great they were.
Yeah, I think that that's probably what happens in every presidential cycle, right? When a new president comes in, they're kind of doing policies right away that are not like long-term goals. They're just sort of in the first 4 years doing policies that are meant to get them reelected for the next 4 years. And then so you don't have any kind of real serious adult thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
if you
Hey, Nakamoto, I see you were throwing up some reactions there. What do you think?
Hi guys. So what I think is Bitcoin is a fix to the fiat supply to this world, which was bought by Satoshi, and Satoshi is hiding probably. What do you all think?
Yes, we think Satoshi is hiding. Who has something else to add?
Yes. So basically, why did Satoshi hide? One main point is Gavin Anderson was going to the CIA to talk about Bitcoin, and from that day onwards, Satoshi vanished.
Profound. Who's next?
Hey, Justin, real quick, I want to give a quick quote before we move too far. And again, Joe, this isn't a slam, but I do like quotes. This
I know you
quote,
do.
here we go. This is a quote, Jekyll Island. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, conspiring with others around the world to build a global political structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. David Rockefeller. We don't have to guess what their motive is.
Hey,
That's from his memoirs.
thank you, Puncher. Man, I encourage everyone to check out Up in the Nest. Dr. Noah put up a nice piece on the drinking age and the federal government's coercion of the states. I encourage everybody to read it.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for bringing me up to the stage. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year as well to kick off. So it's always interesting to hear about these things. I think there was kind of a 3-step process in history, as best I can tell, that kind of led to this nightmare. First was Jekyll Island and the creation of centralizing the Federal Reserve or the central bank of the U.S. Then right after it got put in place, people really didn't have a chance to really fight or do much about it, because the first big mistake of the Federal Reserve was an attempt to take down the Bank of New York, which effectively went a little too extreme, blew up the economy. We got the Great Depression, and then we enter World War I and II. So we fight throughout these world wars, which are now funded by the bank, and then we end up finishing the war, end up in Bretton Woods, and Bretton Woods takes what I would call the first evil act of creating the central bank, and then compounds it by creating two things. They create Bretton Woods to make the US dollar the global reserve currency, and in parallel, they create the CIA and the intelligence apparatus that is going to be the enforcement arm globally of the Bretton Woods Agreement to keep the US dollar. So now we have a global Federal Reserve that effectively mirrors what we watched probably in Game of Thrones. So the money gets corrupted. Shortly after that, we have Eisenhower come out, talk very vividly about the dangers of the military-industrial complex and all the problems that are surrounding the power being given to what ultimately became the fourth branch of government that doesn't exist, which is the intelligence branch. It was supposed to just be the judicial branch, the executive branch, the legislative branch, but we end up with this rogue intelligence agency. So who tries to change that? Kennedy comes in. He does 3 major acts that really piss off the intelligence branch. What does he do? He decides to use silver, issues a bunch of debt from the Treasury, not from the Federal Reserve, and that doesn't go unnoticed by the bankers. Second thing is he rejects the attempt of the intelligence agency to blow up a bomb in downtown Miami to garner public support to invade Cuba and actually eliminate Castro, and then says he's going to splinter the CIA into a million pieces. That was strike 2. Third strike is he blocked the desire of the bankers to escalate the war in Vietnam. And so strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, Kennedy gets killed.
Hey, Alan, sorry to interrupt, man.
Yeah.
Can you use a different mic? I don't know if you're using your car's mic or what, but it's crashing.
Let me try something here.
Okay.
Hold on.
While we're waiting, I just want to go back for a second to this quote, Puncher. Is Puncher still here? Yeah. This thing you read, okay? It pretty much exactly supports what I was trying to tell you. The quote you read from Rockefeller said, "Some even believe we are part of a cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will." That's the charge. I stand guilty and proud of it. So what he's saying is, in his heart of hearts, in his minds, his intention is he wants to create a more integrated one world. Okay, one
He's a
world government.
globalist. He's a
Yeah,
globalist.
he calls himself, the people that call me internationalist, I stand guilty as charged. He's telling you right then and there that he believes genuinely and honestly his intention is to create a more integrated one world internationalist globalist
Okay, Joe,
agenda.
but that makes him an
So so
enemy of
so
his country.
He
That makes him a bad guy.
but no, it makes him a misguided individual because that's a bad thing. We don't want a world
So it's
government.
pretty clear that the United States wants nothing to be a part of a globalist
I
empire at
think
the
there are
time.
millions of people in the United States who disagree with that concept. There are millions of people who actually do want
Okay.
to have a
He
world
was a
government.
good guy. You're right.
I
I'm
never
wrong.
said a
You're
good
smart.
guy.
I'm
I
done.
never called him a good guy. I'm telling you that his intention is one that he believes, however misguided, that what I'm doing is good.
His intentions are in his own best
Yeah, who's
interest
going to run?
and nothing
Who do
more.
you think Rockefeller thought would run that world government?
He thought he would.
There
That's
you
the whole
go.
point.
There you go. So
So,
that's called sedition, right? Like that's.
sedition.
I
The
mean,
fact.
it's treason
It's in
at
the
the very
14th
least.
Amendment. It's in the 14th Amendment. I just read it.
What?
Do you want me to read the 14th Amendment again? I'm happy
That
to
the word
recite what that
sedition is in
says.
there? Is that what you're saying? I don't even follow. We're talking about what these people's intentions were, and I can say, like, a lot of people have really bad ideas. They have terrible ideas. I think his ideas were terrible. Right? Full
Section
disclosure.
3, 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elected of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, blah, 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 or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof.
So,
Do we
so
have
your
enemies around
view,
the globe, Joe?
your view is that wanting to.
My view is he's violating the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and he is a bad guy who should have been put in jail. That's my argument.
Okay, maybe
Oh,
that's fine.
and I may be back when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Alan, much better.
All right, sorry about that. So the only thing I was doing, not going through a huge history lesson, but there's a few backdrops. And I think when we just went through strike 1, 2, and 3 with JFK, obviously he's killed. What immediately happens when he's killed? Johnson becomes put in charge. We immediately escalate Vietnam. All concepts of the Treasury taking control of the money go out the door again. And we get into this status quo that leads to 50 years of what I would say uniparty establishment rule. And effectively, once the intelligence agency realized it could get away with everything and there would be no consequence, and that they had a free reign to go rogue as long as it couldn't be pinned back on the United States as part of their charter, they basically took the original Fed concept for the United States, amplified it globally, and then implemented this. And there's a great book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, which walks through the blueprint of how the only group in the world that has an unlimited credit facility is the World Bank. That's from the US Federal Reserve. That unlimited credit facility gets placed in the hands of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, who then does what? They send out economic hitmen all over the world in non G7 countries. And they purposely go out to say, hey, we're going to help your economy grow. We're going to be the savior. We're going to provide the money you need. But what do they really do? They actually go in, they have them pledge their most prized assets, their lithium, their gold, their natural resources, their oil, their gas, and they give them way too much debt. They know they'll never be able to repay it, but they effectively bribe off the people that are making the decision and enrich them and their immediate cronies at the expense of the rest of the population. So when they do that, this blueprint works fantastically. And then whenever the blueprint doesn't work economically and legally, they'll send in the jackals to go kill people like Gaddafi or Saddam. They'll send the military in like we did under false pretenses. And I'm an ex-Army Ranger, by the way. So in my lifetime, separate from running a NASDAQ company, I also was at the tip of the spear to realize that me and my colleagues went through everything in our military history. All the special ops we did, you said Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, they were all frauds. The
So
premise for every
was Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, were they the problem? That's what we were
Not at all.
told.
Nope.
Well, they were the problem for these people pushing this globalist agenda, which I do think is the enemy of humanity, and they are very, very evil people. But yes, they were the enemy. What was Gaddafi doing? He was giving money to everyone in the country of Libya. He was actually doing some of the largest infrastructure projects successfully: water, energy, uh, sewage, basic things. He also wanted to go to a gold standard and was pushing actively.
Yep. Bingo.
Bingo, back to a gold standard, and the bankers couldn't allow that. So Gaddafi wasn't the madman. He was actually right. Iraq,
That's not what they said on Nightline. Ted
of
Koppel
course,
was saying something quite different.
yeah, just like they said we had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but it wasn't about that. It was about oil and gas. Same thing. Mike Benz does a great summary of everything going on in Ukraine, especially in Donbass and Crimea, and why the Hunter Biden pardon goes back to 2014. We overthrew the freely elected government of Ukraine in 2014. Victoria Nuland did it out of the State Department.
Victoria Nuland.
And you can go on and on with all these things. The whole point was that they wanted Gazprom and Russia to no longer supply all the energy supply to Europe. They replaced it with Burisma, where they put Hunter Biden and a CIA asset on the board. And then, oh shit, everyone in Crimea and Donbass, where all the oil and gas deposits were at, suddenly wanted to be a part of Russia or were a part of Russia. And now suddenly we needed the US military and all the money laundering and human history to flow through Ukraine. So when you talk about like the evil, I'll say that the evil starts from the Khazarian Bolsheviks that never lost. They were forced out of Russia after killing 66 million Christians in Russia. The Red Terror was ended, but all they did is they relocated, they reorganized, they set up their hives of crime in Ukraine and Israel, and then they basically infiltrated the West. And that's why groups like APAC, with the Anti-Defamation League, Southern Poverty Law Center, they have handlers to control everyone in Congress so that we effectively steal the wealth of the US, offshore it under the guise of foreign policy and forever wars, and launder it back to all the politicians, all the corporations, and the cycle continues.
Alan, please write a book. And something else you missed that Lyndon Big Dick Johnson did in 1963 with the assassination of Kennedy was that black people who could hardly be more subjugated and exploited by the Democrats were actually, that was taken up a level so that they were given the free handouts, and the quote was, we'll have those N-words voting for us for the next 100 years. And 60 years into it, that's what's happening.
And effectively took the black father out of the family. Oh, you're married? You don't get as much money. You have a child out of wedlock? Here you go. We'll subsidize that. And we all know you get more of what you subsidize. And they destroyed. Look, black people had it tough in the 50s and 60s, there's no doubt. But we were coming out of Jim Crow. The black family was intact, and they were thriving. And then we removed the black father from the family. And now they're
Sure, but we're trying to do that with all. The depopulation thing is real, hence COVID, hence Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was created by a woman who's probably the most racist human being on earth, and they dropped all the abortion clinics in inner cities because they were purposely focused on trying to decimate African American ranks. So that's
Margaret Sanger.
100% true. And so I think this whole thing about who's evil, who's bad, who's good, there is a very small group of families and a very small group of elites globally who think they are better and smarter than humanity. They are dangerous because they have access to the money printer and they socialize losses and save themselves when everything goes on. The two other books I say everyone has to read is Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail, volumes 1 and 2, that maps out the last 200 years of history very specifically so that everyone can see that the Diddy list isn't accidental, the Epstein Maxwell lists aren't accidental. And all Ghislaine and Jeffrey did was take over their dad Robert's operations for drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking. And oh, by the way, all of those trafficking businesses worldwide, which are trillions of dollars, are meant for the intelligence agencies to have black ops budgets that are answer to nobody. And when I say answer to no one, I'm here in Austin, Texas. I just walked by the old Bush family house down the street here. And even the Bush family, when George Bush Sr. was actually no longer going to be a head of the CIA, what did he do? He didn't leave, he left. And then he took all the networks and set up his own version of the CIA, but private for himself and Cheney and all of the other folks. And this idea of this uniparty is critical because it's not right and left, it's not red and blue. It's globalist versus nationalist and establishment uniparty versus MAGA. That's the battle.
Alan, thank you for saying that. I have 25 years and 11 combat deployments. And when I started figuring this stuff out, I was crushed. It crushed me because I really did think that I was going out there and doing things that were in furtherance of our founding principles. And when I found out that that's not what I was doing, awful.
Hey, Pubs, hang on.
But
Puncher was
Oh, sorry, my
talking,
bad.
but since we're interrupting, I'm
I'm just
just
saying.
gonna let you guys know that we're gonna be wrapping it up at the top of the hour. So 5 more minutes,
Yeah,
and then
I'll
I
stop.
don't know if you guys
Alan,
want to.
thank you, buddy. I
Yeah,
really
yeah. Sorry,
appreciate
go
you
ahead.
articulating that. That was fantastic, and that's you know another book that people should read, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. If you think that USAID is designed to give aid to third world countries, you are sadly mistaken. It is to put control over them and to subjugate them. And just because aid is in the acronym, that's not what that's all about either.
Humanitarian aid, humanitarian in the vein of Barack Obama. Kind humanitarian. Don't get me started, man. Alan, if you write a book, man, I'm the first one in line for it.
Hey, I think there's a lot of
Great
great
topic.
people that have really started diving down rabbit holes. And I think what you've really been watching since 2020, I sort of knew something was wrong when I was running a NASDAQ company and licensing software to groups to use for mobile apps. Sounds innocuous enough, right? Well, one of the ones I happened to pick was the Trump Pence 2020 campaign needed help. So I licensed software to let them do it. What did that lead to? That led to a personal attack on the company I ran and myself and my family. Why? Because I apparently coordinated the messaging to overthrow the United States government on January 6th. And you have to laugh when you really realize that, like, Orange Man bad, immediate family members bad. But if you license software, I was like, wow, did Michael Dell get this treatment for selling, computers to the wrong people or whatever? And when you really peel back the onion to realize how corrupt, criminal, and evil it all is, and then you realize the amount of crime that's been committed and the desperate effort to cover it all up with a bow, I think that the next 4 years are going to be some of the most amazing accountability the world has ever seen against some of the most criminal, corrupt, and treasonous human beings that have ever existed and are openly activated to destroy the United States from within, which is the only way, as Bukele from El Salvador said correctly, you could ever destroy such an amazing nation.
I hope justice is swift and harsh.
Hey, Samuel, did you have something to add?
Well, what do you think, Loren? You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, guys. You know, really appreciate everybody. Yet again, you guys lost me a little bit on some of the stuff, but no offense. Not all these things are for everyone. Definitely appreciate all the different perspectives because I think that's really how we educate and grow as a society, as humanity. So a lot of smart people in here. Really appreciate it. It's amazing. Even the listeners, like I'll scroll through sometimes and see, various folks that I know of, and I'm like, man, I really hope everybody gets as much out of these spaces as I do because it's definitely enhanced my life a great deal. So appreciate all of you guys. I had an awesome Christmas. I hope you all did. I'm going to be taking off for the coast for a few days, so hopefully you guys all have a great New Year as well. It's been amazing as always, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Happy
Lauren.
New Year, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks.